Welcome to the Intercut podcast, the weekly show going over the TV, movies, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me... I'm forgetting my quote. Jeez, already I'm getting a hot dog with me on King Street. Except not this year. It's Arturo Zurita.
Hoping ahead. I'm drinking the double in honor of all of y'all being over there in Toronto. But yeah.
We are back from Tiff. We have seen the movies. We've done the thing. Long flights. Maybe bringing back some sicknesses with us too. But more importantly, we've got all these movies to discuss. So many films. Toronto plays over 100 feature films each year. So it's more than we can handle on our own. So we're bringing in a couple guests. First of all, my balcony bro, Amanda the Jedi. And then, of course, our boys from the Karstcast. We got Jeff and Karsten with us, fresh from Toronto. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing great. Karsten's doing great. I'm doing great.
I just dumped like an entire tea on myself, so I'm doing decent.
I think we're all struggling to adjust back to regular life and our normal routines where we're not trying to see 5 movies in a day or whatever. It's a jam-packed event to head over to Toronto and try and catch all the movies, but really fun, really rewarding. Amanda, you are probably the biggest TIFF veteran amongst us. You have gone through their recent ups and downs with distance seating and virtual festivals. So what was it like back for the 2022 edition of this festival?
It was pretty good. You know, it wasn't like it was kind of back in full force. Last year wasn't as weird as I think some people might have thought it would be. It just felt like you had a lot more room because no one could be sitting in the seats directly next to you in any screening, which was actually very nice. In this, you just ended up slammed around a bunch of people and then just random rows completely empty for no explicable reason, even though the showing was supposed to be sold out. But no, it was good. You definitely got more of like community vibes and like the streets and stuff, and like the just kind of like art fixtures set up on like King Street and all that different kind of stuff. So definitely better than the full digital year. You know, pretty on par. You know, pretty on par with last year. I think the biggest difference is honestly that the press stuff went back to like first come first serve. Like last year, you had to book your press screenings ahead of time, and you couldn't wait. So like if somebody didn't take the seat they were supposed to be in for a press screening, there was no wait list because they didn't want people like dilly-dallying around. So that was the biggest difference. Both have their like benefits. The thing that sucked is that say you were the first person to get through to get your press ticket for whatever, like Dune, for example. You couldn't pick where your seat was. So if you were the first person to get a Dune ticket, you were row AA seat 1, meaning you are that shitty little side seat right in front of the screen. And if it was like a high populated movie, you couldn't just like get there that day and be like, can I just move back? Because I did that for a bunch, but so like half of the time I was going up to somebody being like, hey, are there other like seats available? Can I like swap seats in the same movie for the same time, which they would let you do if it was available. So that was annoying. But in a world where you are allowed to like pick your seat, having like a guaranteed ticket is nice. But there was really only one press screening I didn't get into this year, and it was Women Talking. And I already had a ticket for it. I just wanted it out of the way earlier.
Yeah.
So
they were pretty kind to press this year in terms of allotting us 20 tickets to use for the fest, plus the press screenings, plus some same day tickets that became available. Like if you were there for long enough and you did it smartly, you could see pretty much just about any movie you wanted to, although there were a couple that were maybe harder tickets to get into. Jeff, this was your first time doing the TIFF experience. How did you find navigating all the movies and the theaters and getting into the movies you wanted to see?
It wasn't an ideal first experience because there was a lot of issues with the redemption windows. So because I had obviously the latest redemption window because I'm not Karsten Runquist.
No, it wasn't based on that. I also had the
It was
latest
random.
redemption window. It was random.
Really?
I had the latest
Except for
redemption
Karsten.
window.
I know a guy
Except
who
for
knows
Karsten.
a guy.
Yeah,
who
Oscar
got me
expert
that
had
window.
Yeah.
Oscar expert had the earliest one I knew about.
Wow.
No, but
Yeah,
by
my
the time
PM.
by the time it was open to you and to Amanda and to me, like the website basically just didn't
it didn't
work
work.
anymore.
Yeah, I had to
It
stay
took
on
about-
hold for like 3 hours with some
Yeah,
to get
that's the
something.
thing. I didn't end up staying on hold. It just the website happened to work about 40 minutes later than my window started.
Yeah.
So then I just picked a bunch of stuff. And then weirdly, I got some tickets that Karsten couldn't get. Like I got a ticket to the world premiere of Bros that Karsten had to pay money
Yeah.
for.
I don't want to talk about how much money I paid for the worst seat in the theater for Bros. It was a really humiliating moment. To be
It was
honest.
literally, you said the last row.
It was it was up against the wall, like basically just touching shoulders with the security guard. It was humiliating, but had a good
But
time.
you got in. You got,
I got
into
into
the
Bros.
bro.
I saw Bros. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that once that kind of was dealt with, and I think I still couldn't get a few tickets that maybe I would have been able to if everything was working properly. But everything after that was like really well run and worked perfectly.
Mhm. Karsten, the last time I think you were at TIFF was 2019,
Yeah.
which was quite a year. That's the
Yes,
the
dear.
Lighthouse year, the Uncut Gems year. I think the
Portrait.
list goes on. 2000,
Portrait.
Unbelievable year.
just a great movie year.
Yeah.
How do you think this edition of TIFF stacked up to 2019?
I think I just get lucky because this was a pretty stacked year. Also, I this will be the last time I bring this up, but like I almost repeated the humiliating moment I had in 2019 where I had to leave Knives Out early to catch a screening
Yep.
of The Lighthouse, which it would be the second time I had seen that film. I did not need to see it again, but I left the premiere of, and I almost did it again this year, just because there was like a 5-minute window between Glass Onion and The Fabelmans. But it was, as soon as Glass Onion popped up on the screen, it was just like chaos on the way out of the theater. And again, it was like Amanda was saying, we get in the theater after all that, and there's like rows of just emptiness. And I'm like, what the hell is, it was just a weird vibe.
You were
but,
justified
I mean,
the first year though, because you ended up being able to see.
You saw
your boy
Robert. I
sitting
remember.
there with Willem Dafoe. Yeah.
Robert!
Yeah. Right. I met Josh Safdie at the Lighthouse. The thing is,
Right.
though, is like if there was any movie to not leave early, it's Knives Out, because I had to wait like 6 months to figure out who did it. Like I didn't I knew everything but the who done it for like 6 months. Anyway. Well, it was a great year, though. It was a great year.
Yeah, a really strong year at TIFF. You mentioned in 2019 you got some run-ins with interesting people and famous faces, I guess. My first thing I did at TIFF this year was go into the light box and walk past a confused-looking Kit Harington. So you do get the occasional celeb spotting. Amanda, I know you did a little bit of celeb spotting yourself at TIFF this year.
Yeah. I also saw Finn Wolfhard. I think everybody did.
Yeah.
But
Must see
next
it,
to
He made the rounds.
next to Mr. Wolfhard was Fred Hetchinger from Butcher's Crossing, who is also in all the Fear Street movies, 8th Grade, Vox Lux, a couple of other ones. He's the kid from Women in the Window. He is sitting with Finn, and as they're walking out of the whale, I just see Fred duck down between seats for like 10 seconds and then pops back up with popcorn from like 4 rows away from where they were sitting and just starts eating it. The
It's
man
the kid from
just
the White Lotus.
Yeah, it is the kid from the White Lotus
tracks.
too. So it just, and the whole thing, the thing I kept saying about Butcher's Crossing was that the kid didn't give off the like wide-eyed innocence vibe. He gave off like brain injury vibes, and I was like, "My dude, you're not helping. You're not helping your case." He's super nice, though. He did look super nice, and I'm sure if I'd asked them for pictures, they would have been totally fine with it because they were just like walking out with the pores. So like the fellow us's, but Yeah, but I thought I was like, what is he doing? And then he just coming back up with like fistfuls of someone else's popcorn. Like, who knows what they did to that popcorn? Who knows why they left
that hasn't been tempted by a half-finished bucket of popcorn.
Yeah.
maybe less so in post-COVID times.
Yes,
but.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you walk by any interesting people?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Finn Wolfhard, because he made the rounds.
Hard not to see him at the festival.
Yeah. But I did also walk by Keegan-Michael Key.
Oh, nice.
Hey, that's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely. He was at his hotel, so I just kept walking. I'm like, I'm not gonna bother you.
Also, your hotel?
Yeah.
It was not my hotel.
Okay.
My hotel was a hostel. It was the opposite of his hotel.
Yeah, it's always a little bit bizarre because sometimes you're seeing these celebrities in kind of like the celebrity context. They're at the premiere, or they're walking the carpet, or they're being greeted by a bunch of fans. And then sometimes you just get into an elevator and Danny Glover is standing next to you, and it seems like a bad time to say hi.
Yeah. And then he just says he's too old for that.
Exactly.
Press all the buttons, he leaves.
All right. Why don't we get into some of the movies, because there are a lot of movies that we saw at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. We've divided them up into the different sections of the program, from contemporary world cinema to discovery to the gala, Midnight Madness, platform, and special presentations. But let's start with a couple films that come from the contemporary world cinema category and talk a little bit about Aftersun, which I think is one of the really hyped up films coming out of Cannes earlier this year. Of course, it has Paul Mescal, which I think gives it a bit of buzziness too, but I'm hearing that this is just an absolutely devastating portrait. Amanda, I know you got to catch it, and Art was able to see it as well. So Amanda, does the hype around this one live up to it? What did you think about Aftersun?
I think it definitely does. I don't know if it's going to be the movie necessarily for everyone, but I think if you know what it's going for, it's one of those rare situations that might actually say, like, read the synopsis of the movie so that you kind of understand what the director is, like the story she's trying to tell in terms of like this memory of her father and like a trip that they took together. And the girl was a phenomenal actress. This is the only thing she's ever been in, and she like blew me away, like so
Frankie
good.
Corio.
Yeah, because like you expect good things from Paul, and he was great as well. But like kid actors can honestly ruin a movie, as we will talk about later on. But this fantastic, just really, really great performance out of her.
Yeah, it's a very like dreamlike movie because it's a girl looking back at her father through what would be these DV tapes that were shot in a camcorder, kind of like wondering, is she searching for something in those DV tapes to try to like piece together something about her father? But it's the direction here that was really good. I had seen Charlotte Wells' first film at the first festival I'd ever been accredited to in Chicago.
Ooh.
It was Blue Christmas. And I still have my notes in my little notepad. The first time I saw that, that was a fantastic short. It's the only short of hers that you can't find on her Vimeo. That's how good it is.
Wow.
And this being her feature film, I'm very curious to see what she has next, because I think it's very difficult to, one, find a good child actress, but even more so to direct something that takes its time and is able to really embody the emotions of what it's like to be a kid looking back at what you thought your father was. So I think it's going to hit for a lot of people.
Zach, you're
muted.
Oh no.
Speechless.
Trying to do too many things at once. Yeah.
Speechless.
And is it as devastating as it's been made out to be? Is this like one of the big tearjerkers of the year, you think, or am I overselling it in that regard?
It can be.
It can be. I think it hits a point that if you've really been involved in what the story's going for and what she's going through, kind of looking at her father and like what the dad's going through too, I think it can definitely stir those really strong emotions. I don't think it's not a manipulative type of emotional movie. Like sometimes like it's not trying to get you with the music. It's not trying to get you with, certain tricks or anything. It's just that it's one of those things. I think if you're invested in the story, it just kind of leaves you devastated by the end, but not in a way that you're going to be this like blubbering mess. And I'm not saying that manipulation in that way is always bad. Portrait does it 3 times in its finale, and I love every time, but this is just very, very subtle in how it does it.
Quick shout out to
someone had
the. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Doubling up with yours, I know someone had asked about Paul's performance, and I think, as Amanda said, it's a very subtle performance where you're just following along as they're at this resort. It's not going to be as pushy as maybe a lot of other of Paul Mescal's fans are looking forward to from the series that he has done. But I think with his reservedness is what makes it so good.
Yeah.
Cool. Quick shout out to those of you who've left super chats. Wiley Todd, supporting my homies Karsten and Jeff, loving the content, everyone. And also Josh, who said that they might be seeing Women Talking at BFI London next month, and that they'd love to see us all together. Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about Women Talking later, but I think we'd all recommend you check that one out if that's potentially available to you. Let's get into the next movie, though, which is one that I think I'm the only one who got to see. It is Alam. This is a Palestinian film, and I kind of thought this one sort of felt almost like a muted, disaffected version of something like Do the Right Thing or Boys in the Hood, where it's really like this community that is that the young people in this community sort of realizing through the progression of the plot that they have to become more involved in something, right? That they can't just sort of sit on the sidelines. This one takes place in Israel, in the occupied territory, at a school where these students are, coming of age and sort of deciding what's next for them, being pulled in different directions by some people who want to fight for their rights and some parents who want them to kind of not get involved. And I don't know, I found this one to be a pretty interesting slice of Palestinian life, particularly for a young person, albeit in the form of a type of story that might be very familiar if you've seen, this sort of genre of age movie. It really, where it stands apart is in its place, like the feeling for the location and the perspective that this comes from. One of the things that I think was very interesting in general, seeing movies at TIFF, is because Toronto is such like an international city that has so many different people from so many different backgrounds. When you see a movie like Alam or something that doesn't necessarily come from US or Canada or something, you do get a lot of people of the descent of the country showing up for the film. The crowd was full of people of Palestinian descent who asked questions about things that I had no knowledge about. So that's another thing that I do really enjoy about getting to see the festival, is like it is an opportunity to sometimes see these films with a crowd that might have like a greater awareness and understanding for what makes those films unique or special.
Yeah, I saw that with No Bears. Just
right.
Yeah,
Ooh,
just
excited for
lots of people. Unfortunately, a lot of them showed up like right as the runtime started, and we're really struggling to find seats. And they came in with like full families, so like you would just get families getting plopped all over different areas of the theater. But it was like really cool to see.
Yeah, it's the eye and TIFF.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Which, I mean, I think the world premiere of Bros was like made a lot more fun because of that. I mean, it's like a lot of LGBT. I just mean it's like a community. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Well,
you can't say there were no bears at Bros, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, of course.
Plenty of bears.
I got a bro
Bros.
story too when we get to it, because I just saw it last night, but I understand 100% what you mean.
My building has a fire alarm going off right now, but it might be a false alarm. So I'm going to mute my camera, mute my microphone, and ask Amanda to talk a little bit about Plan 75.
Okay, sick. Yeah, so Plan 75. I actually saw, this is not to the quality of it, but when I saw it at Con, but it was like a day I was like kind of sleepy, so I fell asleep for a little bit. So I ended up making time to see it again, like my first day at TIFF, and it's really, really great performance, especially out of kind of like the central like older woman. It's basically one of these things that to deal with like an aging population that a lot of people are believing are kind of eating the resources of the country. They start offering literally at the age of 75, you can volunteer to be killed. the government will like pay you money that you can do whatever you want with it before you do that. But just whole thing where that's the thing, and they have people who literally go around trying to like talk people into it, but they also have to be very clear that like you can back out at any time you want. They even like hire people to kind of talk to you on the phone leading up to it, but like they're specifically told that they're not supposed to try to like talk you out of it beyond telling you the one time that you don't have to go through with it if you don't want to. So it's kind of a very interesting look in how some of the people whose jobs it is to, you know, talk to those people, how it changes if it's someone that they actually know personally, what people feel like their value in society is, especially in a society where people do want to be very productive members and kind of don't like feeling like they're no longer in that position, like how humane it even is to make this suggestion. So it's kind of like it's a really, really hard watch, beautiful. Probably didn't go quite as far with some of the premise as it could have, but I thought that they handled it in like a really interesting way from like different perspectives in a society.
Interesting. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I only caught a bit of that.
I know, I was about to say, like, you were like, oh yeah, and like, yeah, you weren't.
You know, my building does this every now and then, where they'll just like put out a fire alarm and then say, "Oh yeah, that was just a test." Where the other day I got my dog dressed and walked down 17 flights of stairs before we realized it was a fire alarm or a false alarm. So
damn,
it's fun to live in a building that is really well run.
You got your dog dressed?
like leash. I leashed her up. I don't know. How do you want?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Leashes are oppressive.
Exactly.
Penny's clothing.
Exactly. We want to use like humane terms for it. All right. Let's go back to movies that only Amanda saw. With The Origin of Evil.
This one was like pretty decent. It is kind of like the definition. I've been describing it as be gay, do crimes. Wait, not like that. The movie. Yeah, it's like pretty interesting. This woman just shows up. She calls somebody and is like, "Hey, I'm your daughter. You know, my mom kept me from you for all these years." And it's this guy who, you know, has a bunch of money, owns different hotels, different property around there. And then he kind of pulls her into this thing because it seems like the family he does have is trying to like usurp like executive control for him so they can have control over his money. And now he wants to use this new woman that's popped up to like be the new heir to his throne so that he doesn't have to like give up the money and all that. But it goes in these multiple layers of very, very interesting directions. And I think that if it had been edited a little bit better, if it had been a bit snappier, this would be like probably just an amazing movie, like kind of up there with not necessarily like a Knives Out specifically, but kind of like a similar vibe. If they had just really managed to keep that energy higher, it's like so close to being like a fantastic movie. As it stands, it's pretty decent, but like not something that I ever need to watch again. It's probably more fun to like describe the plot of what happens than, yeah. I think Zach said do indie revenge earlier as a joke, but that actually, it actually fits pretty well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Not something that would necessarily be like fit in on Netflix, though. It sounds like, or would it?
Yeah. Probably not. Like, not like, oh, this is an amazing Netflix thing. No, I think it's a little bit too long. And I think it's just a little, it's not slow, but like it just feels like it meanders in places that it doesn't need to.
And The Rock's not in it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was actually my next statement. Oh my God.
Another movie from contemporary world cinema is The Swearing Jar. This is an interesting film about a couple that is expecting a child and decides to try and become more adult-like in various ways. And it, for the most part, plays out like a pretty typical indie dramedy. And then there is a thing that happens that I'm not going to spoil. But there is a thing that happens that's unexpected that might otherwise have left me very frustrated had the film not executed it really well. I think it's something that could have been played off for like a cheap shock, but is so integral into how the movie told its story that I ended up pretty impressed, actually, even though it's kind of like a fairly standard dramedy for most of its runtime. Adelaide Clemens is very good in it. It's not necessarily something that I think you should necessarily go out of your way for, but once this does pop up on streaming, does end up on some streaming service, it's interesting. It's emotional and probably worth your time if you're looking for something a little low key. So yeah, the swearing jar.
Is
the
that
poster.
The dude from Suits?
Yeah, it is the guy from Suits, Patrick J. Adams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but the poster is terrible. It looks like
a
a
bad-
direct-to-DVD, like 2013 indie movie.
Yep,
Yeah.
Some
that's the
Hallmark
thing.
stuff
And
right there.
Terrible poster.
Supposed to
So
come out
it's
the
easy-
23rd, so it might be on the
Oh.
horizon.
Oh.
hopefully they find a better poster by then, I guess. I don't know. All right, let's move to the Discovery section of the catalog and talk a little bit about Baby Ruby. This is the movie that Kit Harington, I think, was in town for. A film about a couple with a new child and the wife's postpartum depression that starts to unravel as they deal with their new situation. Amanda, you were the only one of us who caught this one. With Kit and our girl Noemi Merlant from Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Hey.
My lady.
What did you think about?
This is a really hard watch. It does what it's supposed to extremely well, but if I had not been like in the middle of a row with like 6 people over there and 6, I probably would have walked out. It is a lot of crying baby. I don't deal well with the sound of a crying baby. It's hard. It's very stressful watch. But in that note, it does a very good job expressing how just never ending these emotions from postpartum depression would end up feeling, and how much it like affects your life and how you're sleeping, and like the ways you can start to interpret things, and like how horrific things can start being, and how little help some women feel like they end up having. But yeah, it was a very hard watch. I will never watch it again in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe intentionally it was aggravating in that way. Did it cross that line from perhaps being a little bit too just unpleasant that you couldn't even engage with it?
For me, yes, I could engage with it, but I like there was so many moments where I was like, I need to be gone from here. I need to be out of here. I really need to leave, I think. Oh, but there's so many, I don't want to disturb those people. It was a press screening. I could have gotten, like, no one cares if you disturb a press screening.
Yeah, a lot of people leave early from those press screenings.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, it is a good movie. I just can't do this anymore. I just can't. the screaming, I can't do it anymore. Yeah, so take that for what you will.
All right. Another movie that I caught in the Discovery section is Bruiser. This is one that we talked about on my favorite films of TIFF, because it's based on a short film that both Art and I liked quite a bit, directed by Miles Warren. This one is about a young boy who turns to an unfamiliar guy to teach him some ways of life and how to fight. And it ends up just being this really haunting and well-told story of masculinity and the ways in which violence begets more violence. I think while maybe there's some takeaways to the film that are a little bit trodden territory, right? Like the takeaways about masculinity are not brand new takeaways. It's the presentation here that is so novel and so beautiful and so compelling. The color palette of this film, which is just like drenched in these yellows and reds with these green lights, it just kind of it gives it this very unique look, and it's just beautifully shot, beautifully acted. Just I think one of the really stunning debuts that I've seen. So it's one that makes me think we're going to get a lot of really interesting stuff from Miles Warren at some point in the future. This one was really interesting too. I really like Trevante Rhodes, particularly here, an actor who I've liked a lot in his various roles, but seems to be finding new sides to himself in films like this. Yeah, I mean, Bruiser, it's a real standout for me from TIFF. Definitely one of the best movies I saw here.
Catch the short if you can. Highly recommend.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna push that short on all of you if you haven't seen it yet, because it's really effective and really interesting. Only 10 minutes, available on YouTube right now.
Nice.
Easy to watch
For free.
All right, Arturo, let's go to one of the movies that you have actually seen. I like movies.
Woo!
I think we can all relate, at least on the premise.
Nah.
No.
No, it's really solid. I talked about in the on last week how this is coming from a lot of the producers who worked on the last Blockbuster documentary that Netflix was able to get a hold of, ironically, and now they're making a Blockbuster series over on Netflix, and this is like the best indie version of that. They just don't have the rights to use Blockbuster, so it's like a regular home video chain where this kid who is working on his final project for the year and is trying to get into college comes in and starts working at this video store. But there's a lot of baggage that this kid has, and a lot of baggage that the other employees who work at the store have as well. I put it a lot. I connected it a lot to the movie that just came out, Funny Pages. The same approach that movie has in like being, cringy when it needs to be, showing someone who overly loves something to the point that they could be annoying about it. This is that, but for movies. So I'd say if you're a big fan of that movie that just came out, definitely put this one on your radar, because it's as nerdy and as annoying as probably a lot of us are when it comes to talking about movies with other people.
Yeah, I did try to see the press screening, and I missed by about 3 slots. So I tweeted that they didn't let me in because I didn't like movies enough, and then the director liked it.
That's even better than getting
link,
to
bro.
see it.
Yeah, they
Yeah, you
did.
should've- Not even a link. Yeah,
That's
I thought
funny.
it was really good. Yeah.
Oh man, you cut too.
Yeah, I ended up getting to the link before it expired.
Nice.
Sorry, Zach.
Maybe we'll
He
get
didn't
it
like
back
movies
later.
enough. That's what it
Yeah,
I
was.
don't like
exactly.
movies enough.
All right. I did get to see a film that is currently being called Soft, although it was previously announced as Pussy, and still is Pussy on Letterboxd, and still is Pussy if you watch the movie and read the title card. But in the program, it says it's called Soft. And I thought this was a pretty fascinating, again, coming of age story about these 3 adolescent queer boys who are sort of see a greater world of queerness around them that they don't yet have access to, and are just sort of allured by it and tempted by it, even though it's clearly stuff that they are not yet old enough to have. But it really does evoke that feeling you get as a child, seeing all the fun of an adult world and knowing you just are not allowed into it yet. And it does it from a perspective that I don't feel like I've seen before in this very like queer friend group of young boys. I don't know. I think the casting in particular is really excellent, because you do have these actors who all feel like a part of this world and feel very just like comfortable and lived in and authentic, and it almost takes on the feeling of a docudrama because it has that layer of like just naturalism to it. I thought this was a pretty fascinating coming of age movie. One of the standouts for me from this part of the festival. Another film that actually won an award in the Discovery section is Something You Said Last Night, about a 20-something writer who accompanies her family, including her younger sister, on a vacation. And I think this is really like, it's kind of like an ennui movie, just sort of like a frustrations of growing up, sparse drama. But I think it's because it sort of centers on this transgender woman, that you do get some nuances to the story that you don't see in films like it. I think I've definitely seen films that are of this mold before, but not necessarily centered around this type of character. That being said, like, it does feel a little bit sparse, at least for me. I kind of felt like I was looking for something to sink in my teeth into a little bit more, and this is maybe a bit more of like a slice of life kind of drama. So interesting for sure, but not one of the movies that stood out to me, at least from this section. But let's move on to a movie that I think a bunch of us saw in Susie Searches. This is a movie about a aspiring true crime podcaster, I think we can call Kiersey Clemens' character, an awkward college student who seizes on an opportunity to become involved in a viral news story about the disappearance of her classmate, and it then begins to spin out from there. I think this one was on my radar because it has a pretty stacked cast. Beside Kiersey Clemens, you get Alex Wolff, Jim Gaffigan, Ken Marino, Rachel Sennett, a small role for Jared Gilman. Amanda, what did you think about Susie Searches?
I thought it was super fun. This is one of the ones you kind of like walk out of being like, yeah, this is like perfect for Netflix, like not in a bad way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in like a very fun way. Like teenagers are probably going to have a really good time with this movie. I really like the direction it ended up going in because I was already interested in it like before I really knew what kind of like the direction it could have even taken. So I thought it was really fun in that way. I always love seeing Rachel Sennett in just about anything. She just pops in and she kind of like steals the screen for a little bit. So that's super fun. But I'm seeing like a very weird poster for it right now. They switched the poster on Letterboxd and it's not good. Because like the first image I saw is like her smiling face with the braces, and that is like the perfect image. This is a terrible image, and I feel like this gives a horrible representation for what the movie actually ends up being.
It looks like the Ryan Reynolds movie Buried or something.
Yeah, like not.
It's better than the swearing jar poster still.
Yeah, but the swearing jar I think is going to actually manipulate the right kind of audience to watching it. They want the Notebook rom-com crowd watching that movie, and that's with the swearing jar. This is not the correct vibe for this movie in the slightest. But just like any kind of general idea of like somebody trying to like build up a podcast like that, and just like this like search for popularity, and like when you're introduced to her, you find out that she just has this like natural affinity for like mysteries and solving things. So you kind of think it's going in one direction, and then it just kind of like smacks you in the face and goes a different way. So I thought it was super fun.
Karsten, were you a little more mixed on it?
I'm a little bit more mixed on it. It is kind of like two different movies. Like a certain thing happens and then it turns into a different film. And I think that second half worked a lot better for me because I was like, oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the film is kind of trying to be I honestly, the humor just wasn't really my thing. It's like trying really hard to live in this like Napoleon Dynamite-esque world where everyone's kind of quirky and weird. And like, I think when you can like tell the actors are trying really hard to be quirky, it just comes off like really unfunny to me at least. And I think when the film starts to kind of take itself a bit more seriously, this is not the film to take seriously, but like once it starts to like really focus in on this mystery aspect, I was having a blast. And I agree. I think like it's a great point. Like it is the perfect Netflix film. Like, and I do think, it's going to be big on TikTok probably. I wish I was kind of going into it also hoping that it would dive a little bit more into the true crime podcast subject. Like why, like, the implications of this being such a popular genre, and it doesn't really get into it the way I wanted it to. But it's still it's fun. It's fun. I just wish it was a bit more, and I wish it just took itself a bit more serious towards the beginning. But Alex Wolff killed it, and I thought he was hilarious. I
ended up pulling a Karsten with this in reverse. I don't know what the ending is because my link expired on me, so now I'm gonna have to wait to figure out how this movie ends.
No,
how far did you get into it?
Like right when things start to turn, it's like 40% of the way in, and then it turned off. So I'm gonna have to patiently wait.
Usually, once you're going, you're good. Like
it stopped on me. So I'm curious because the editing pops a lot. It's very like you guys said, very fast paced. I really like your Napoleon Dynamite reference there because that's definitely how it comes off at the beginning, especially when she's dealing with her classmates and when she works at her fast food chain. So I'm curious to finish it whenever it comes out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a movie that kind of worked in fits and starts. I feel like it feels a little bit herky jerky. There's some scenes that are really good, and then other scenes that are a little bit like, what are we doing here? It didn't really feel cohesive to me, but there was still enough there that I really enjoyed it, whether it's the performances, whether it's that whole idea of like where obsession eventually leads. And yeah, I mean, I the twist really, or the second half, I should say, really worked for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about another one that Art and I got to catch. It's Sweet As, sort of a story of a bunch of outcast teenagers who go on a what is it, like a character building trip
Yeah,
of
they're
sorts
out in the desert
in Australia.
And they're just a lot of them have their own issues that they're coming in, and you have these two. I want to say it was two of them, like the counselors who are walking them around this place as they kind of like go at each other. Like a lot of New Zealand films, I want to say this one's from New Zealand. You also get those hints of colorism that happens down there, especially with Native people, and specifically with the group that they have, the way that they clash with each other. But it's also a really beautiful looking movie, because one of the things that they do when they're out on this trek is that they're all given a camera. They have to take away their phones, and they're given a film camera to really showcase that when you're taking a picture, it has to be the perfect shot. So I really like the cinematography with it. I like the balance between the characters. So yeah, I would recommend this once it's out as like a rental. Hopefully you get a really good version of it, because we got the screener to it. And I know that if you would have seen this up on the big screen, as you can see from the poster there, you would have had some really beautiful shots in HD.
Yeah, I think it's like they advertise it as sort of like the Breakfast Club meets the Outback. And I think it's kind of in that mold of like teens who are going through stuff, like maybe even like a Miseducation of Cameron Post without the like heavy queer themes in that film. Just like an interesting mix of like authentic teen drama and then maybe a little bit more like cloying, weepy stuff. But I thought it was satisfying. I thought it was sweet. Pun intended, I guess, there. But yeah.
Did they do a Breakfast Club thing where at the end they like freeze frame the fist in the air and play "Don't You
That
Forget
would
About Me"?
have given it the extra half a star.
All right, let's move on to Inspection, which is going to be the closing night movie at the New York Film Festival. So Art and I will get a chance to see it soon. Haven't yet, though, so we leave it to Amanda and Karsten to tell us what to expect. Amanda, I think you have your little one-sentence review.
I do. The Marines say only we can be homophobic. Oorah. And that is my takeaway from this movie. Which is actually unfortunate, because I realized that this is like Elegance Bratton's real life story of, dealing with a mother who didn't, accept his sexuality, and like the homelessness he had to experience as a result of it. And then feeling like his only option was to turn to the military, to be like a Marine and to get out of it. But then I feel like it starts mixing its politics there towards the end, when it has to kind of turn into this like us versus you narrative. And it starts feeling very weird. Like, what are we doing here? What did we just watch for like the past hour and a half happening to this person that we're now just going to be like, ma'am, we don't ask and he doesn't tell. Like, whatever. It's weird. Like, congratulations to having this clearly very important movie made. It's entertaining to watch. Like, it's not like, I don't hate, it's not like one of these things you're watching and you're bored and you're annoyed. It's just like, by the end, you're just kind of like, what? But that's my opinion, at least. I don't know how Karsten feels.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with James in the chat says, I heard it's boring. I think it's like a fascinating movie for most of it, because it's just like, you think it's going in a certain direction, and then every now and then it kind of pulls back, and it's like, you think it's like very against the military, but every now and then is like, but they're a family. And it's like, it's I don't know. I agree. I think there are a lot of aspects of it that I love. I think the sound design specifically is really like overwhelming in a cool way. Jeremy Pope is fantastic. It does have like some surprisingly funny moments. You don't think it's gonna be sort of funny, but it's like they're not even like funny. They're just like, you kind of smile it off. But then again, it's like those aspects of it, like the fact that there's like comic relief in a film like this. I'm like, I don't know if that's what this film is. I don't know if that's
Been totally confused, maybe.
Yeah, it's like it's got this like coda kind of energy to it that's very crowd pleasy, and like end it with like a good. I mean, that's a weird movie to compare this to, but it's just very crowd pleasy, and I don't know. The ending feels a lot more simple minded than the subject is.
Okay.
Like it makes sense, but I also don't think the film is on the same page as itself. For most of it. Like for how critical it is of the military, it ends on a very pro-military note that I am just like, what is going on here?
That's crazy.
I think it's sort of clashing with like the message that Elegance probably wanted to put out into the world, but then had to like reckon with the reality of what actually happened was. And that's okay if it hit to a point where it was like, suddenly these people that have largely been like beating you down for the past X amount of months are now the people that are trying to hold your back up. Because you've made it through all of their abuse and terrible behavior. And then that makes you feel good when the person that's supposed to have your back your entire life is once again letting you down and treating you marginalized. So I feel like you're going to have some kind of weird attachment to that, but it just feels like it ends up with like very conflicting internal politics.
And I was kind of talking to you about this, like I think you could make the argument that the end is more clever than it makes itself out to be, and that the military kind of manipulates these kinds of people into thinking like this is a home you can come, like you always have us, when in fact it's you don't. And
look at how veterans are treated in the United States or anywhere, you know.
And that in that way, I'm like, oh, maybe this is a pretty clever movie. But the way if you've seen the film and you've seen the ending, it doesn't come across like it's this like nuanced point. It's trying to. It's very like this is a happy ending, and it's not a very happy story. So
The director, he had done a previous doc called Peer Kids, which I had linked there. That's a really good documentary, and it's on Criterion Channel. I would highly recommend that. Because knowing what he does there and how he covers a lot of trans folk, specifically who are homeless, it sounds like you guys are saying like he almost is giving an institution way more credit than what they should be. But I'm curious to catch it. I know A24 is releasing it mid-November, so
gotcha.
I guess.
Josh in the live stream asks, was Gabrielle Union good?
She was fine.
Not a standout.
Like, Gabrielle Union's always great, and it's a very, very different role for her, to the point that she didn't even really want to do the role until I think she found out like kind of like what the involvement was, and like, so that's rough. Like it's a good performance, but it's it's not something that I would say that like Pope's performance just like blows everything else out of the water. So like it's not something that I think we lost Karsten.
I agree with Shane though. That's what it looked like off the trailer.
Yeah, that she didn't. Yeah, because she even said in like the interviews that she didn't, you know, like it wasn't really something, and then she kind of had to find some kind of level of empathy to be able
That's what Naomi Harris said.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, like you kind of have to try to find a way to level with someone who would treat their child this way. And it's like, no, maybe you don't actually have to find the humanity in someone who would treat their child that way. I don't think it's necessary. Like you can if you want, but I don't think that humanity expresses itself in the role at all. Honestly, she's like just a very terrible mother. So
maybe method acting isn't the move for that role.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But she's a queen. She's a queen. Always love Gabrielle Union in anything. So, you know, but it's not something that I would be like, oh my God, you have to see your performance in this.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a couple films that I saw. The Young Arsonists, the first of them, a film about a group of adolescent girls who come together and move into one of their former homes to sort of start their own rules together, kind of in a sort of like almost Boys of Summer-ish way. Kings of Summer was the movie, I think it is, actually. Yeah. Although this definitely has more of like a melancholic introspective edge to it, and honestly, it's just a little more punishing than I wanted a movie like this to be. It kind of violated my film festival rule of don't kill the dog if there's not a necessary reason to kill the dog. But there's a few just like cheap shocks like that along the way that ultimately made me lose any goodwill I had for this thing, as well as some like strange editing choices. There's a moment where one of the girls says, "No, I want to stay home." And then the next shot is of that girl going and the girl who asked her to go out staying at the home. Just like some weird continuity choices that, I don't know, took me out of it in a way that I was hoping not to be taken out of it, because it has a lot of potential there. And I think the performances from the young actors are really good, but just didn't come together for me on the Young Arsonists. There's also This Place, which is a film about a couple of young women who fall in love while also confronting elements of their past and their heritage. And I think it sort of is a film that speaks to what I was talking about earlier about Toronto as this place of lots of communities, in that this is a film that is set in Toronto and is sort of about the intersection of different immigrant communities, different First People communities, different Native Canadian communities too. And I think it's interesting in the ways that it talks about that intersection, but ultimately it does it through this dialogue that's a little bit too overwritten. The characters are explaining how they feel to each other constantly in a way that just takes the tension and the mystery out of the movie. I just feel like it's something that maybe needed another dialogue pass of the script, because the story at its center is an interesting one. I just think it was a little bit too overtold, if that makes sense. What else do we have, though? We should move on to the gala presentations category.
Ooh.
Got some big movies here. First one being
$65 a ticket.
Yeah.
Put on
80.
our fancy shoes.
80.
Oh,
What?
Yeah.
80.
Oh, because it's Canadian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the conversion definitely worked in our favor this year. I noticed something though with Alice Darling. It does share the word darling with Don't Worry Darling, and apparently Florence Pugh's character is named Alice in
Yeah.
Don't
she
Worry
is.
Darling.
Wow.
Yeah, very. That's why it's been so confusing. That's why I keep calling it "Don't Worry, Alice," not Alice Darling.
It did get me thinking about how when you are at a film festival, you end up coming across lots of doubles, whether that's themes or actors or just titles. Like for instance, this year at TIFF, not only did we have the Lost King, but we had the Woman King as well.
Mhm.
And
King's Horseman.
Yeah.
there's another one. And beyond the Woman King, we also had Women Talking. I know Jeff got into a little.
I had a nice doubles night where I saw the world premiere of Brother back to back with the world premiere of Bros, which I think they did that on purpose. It's in the same theater, back to
Yeah,
back.
absolutely did.
Even if it's just
Very different
alphabetically.
films. Very different
Yeah.
films.
They seemed very different, like very different movies. We'll get into those too in a little bit. There was a lot of daughter movies this year too. The Eternal Daughter, Prisoner's Daughter, Daughters of Rage. There's a couple Sun movies, In the Sun and Aftersun, even though those are different spellings of Sun. Also the just a single women's name movies, Amanda and Emily, that were at the festival. I don't know if any doubles came, like there are any doubles that stood out to any of you from your experience covering the festival, because I don't know, you see a lot of movies and they start to blend together. For example, Empire of Light and The Fabelmans are both deeply personal, nostalgic looks into the power of cinema that also see the filmmaker commenting on their mother's mental illness.
I feel like Empire of Light thinks it was that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't. You
At
could have
least attempted to be.
You could have set that movie in a hotel and it would have been exactly the same goddamn thing. Like, I'm sorry, I did not feel the magic of cinema from that at all, except for that one scene. But
It was a nice scene though. Pretty
It was.
shots.
That's it.
Very pretty shots.
Sorry.
Okay, we will get into Empire of Light and the others in a moment. Let's go back to Alice Darling. I talked about this a little bit on our best films of the festival pod, but I really liked this very lived-in portrayal of dealing with abuse and trauma and escaping from a toxic relationship. Amanda, what was your takeaway about the new Anna Kendrick film?
I just thought it, in terms of just her behavior, was just a really good look at what an abusive relationship can and like will be, and when it's not always just like overtly physical, in the little ways people that want to control you will word things so that you don't maybe want to hang out with people. They don't just flat out say you can't hang out with your support network, you can't hang out with your family. It's they'll find little annoyances you might have with your friends or your mom or your brother, and then they nitpick on that, and then they say like, don't you just think that your life would be less stressful if you didn't, you know, make time for those people? Or you know, like, why don't we just go do something? And just how you start shifting every aspect of your life based on how you think your partner is going to react to it. So with Anna Kendrick, there's a lot of physical things that would happen. Like you see it in the poster there, the tying the finger, like the hair around her finger.
Yeah.
And then just like the squeezing and the kind of like, you know, pulling her hands through her hair. I think it's probably one of the best performances that Anna Kendrick has ever had. And there's like a very interesting parallel that I feel like some people don't, or at least I haven't seen talked about a lot, where it's like there's a missing girl at one point that Kendrick becomes like very fixated on. And this kind of like idea of, you know, how people can go missing in kind of like a lot of different ways is kind of how I saw it kind of going, how you can lose yourself in a lot of different ways. Obviously, very different scenario. I'm not trying to compare an abusive relationship to like being kidnapped and like presumably murdered or something, but it was just that kind of like idea of like who this other woman was, like what her life might have been like, and like Kendrick's character just kind of really fixating on that. And I think that a lot of the times the movies that deal with like abusive partners always do escalate in really, really huge ways. I like how this played things with like the subtle comments and like the waiting until he had her alone, and just his general like attitude towards things, and how she's constantly thinking in her mind how she's going to preemptively deal with these reactions. So I thought it was like really good and a really great performance out of her.
Yeah, it's one of those films that's like, it's about an abusive relationship, but it's the kind of abusive relationship that probably a lot of people would look at and not necessarily see the abuse. And like, it's not like a movie, it's not like The Assistant where it's not showing you anything and sort of implying it all. It does show you, but I think in being a little bit more subtler, in allowing you to sort of get a picture of her, how she carries herself and how that anxiety sort of manifests before you see the root of the anxiety, you just get a portrayal that feels really lived in and feels like a person going through something, not just like a performance, not just like a writerly exercise. And, you know, it all kind of builds to this ending that I thought to be like some of the tensest minutes I had throughout Tiff in any movie. So I don't know. I think it was extremely effective. It's not a movie that I had like high on my list going into the festival, but it's definitely one of the best movies I saw while I was there. Cool. All right, let's go on to Butcher's Crossing. Amanda, you're the only one who saw this one. Aside from your Fred Heckinger run-in, what did you think of the Western starring Nicolas Cage?
It started off with them talking about all the struggles they had with the filming process, and how like they had to record it, I think in like 28 days or 18 days, something like that. It got cut way down from like what their planned shoot was. And I was like, oh, that's not boding well for what we're about to see. It's fine. It's not great. It's very forgettable. I've already kind of like forgotten a lot of the points I had for Butcher's Crossing at this point.
Yeah, that was like what, 40 movies ago at this point?
Yeah, I saw that like the first Friday. So that was like the second full day of the festival that I saw it. I really just wanted to see Nick Cage in the flesh. They let him have one big Nick Cage moment in the movie. You know, he's just like, "You'll eat your buffalo meat," you know, like one of those. And it's basically about like kind of like the how, you know, American settlers kind of went through and started decimating like the buffalo and bison population. And it's very specifically like this one really focuses on like one man's obsession with just like taking them all out for like no reason, as it like even gets to a point where like you can't use any of it anymore. And it's like we can't sell half the stuff we're taking. We can't use most of the meat. We're just leaving these like rotting carcasses through this valley. And it's like a very interesting focus. And then the end points out like, yeah, like we decimated these populations like immediately since from getting here, bringing them down from like millions down to like hundreds. And now thankfully we're back up to like hundreds of thousands thanks to like conservation efforts from Aboriginal First Nations communities. But then that's not really what the movie is about. And I almost feel like it's focusing a little bit too much on like one man's obsession versus like, no, this was like an entire like thing that like settlers did horrifically. It wasn't like one man's obsession. So I don't know. It was like fine. It's fine. It's not something that I would recommend running out to watch. It's a bit long too, and it kind of meanders in certain areas. And like I said, Fred's character is supposed to be this like young guy who decides he wants to see the world instead of staying at Harvard, and it just kind of seems like he's a little like I feel like he got hit in the head or something, but he didn't. It's just, you know, kind of the vibe he's giving off. But yeah, that was
and you saw
it was
the
fine.
public
I
screening?
did. I saw the premiere, the world premiere of Butcher's Crossing, because I wanted to see Nick Cage. I was just like, oh, it fits in my schedule. I'll go see Nick Cage.
Yeah, because I remember Karsten almost went to the press screening, but it was so early in the morning.
It's like an 8 a.m. press screening of this.
That's like, a good time for it, though, actually. Shockingly. That's a great time for it. The only time for it.
I thought I was going to fall asleep.
And you know what? And you probably would have been fine. Fine to follow along.
You would have been woken up by Nick Cage yelling about buffalo meat.
It gets it also gets like very gratuitous in how it shows like them dying, like him just like go running through them and stuff. And it's just kind of like, how many times do I need to see a buffalo get shot? Like, not this many, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but
definitely feels like something I want to watch first thing in the morning. Your review at the festival also convinced me not to see it first thing in the morning. So we'll get around to it eventually, right? All right. Another movie that I was convinced not to see while I was in Toronto was Prisoner's Daughter, which Karsten bit the bullet and saw that for us, and then I traded in my ticket shortly afterward. What's going on here, man? Because if this one, it's got Brian Cox, it can't be that bad, can it?
Oh man, I mean, he actually like it kind of hooks you immediately. Brian Cox is in prison.
Tyson Ritter.
In a lot of ways, I was like, oh, this is Succession season 5. Like Logan went to prison, and that made me have a little bit more fun with it. But it was, I always was like optimistic with Catherine Hardwicke because I like the first Twilight, which she directed. I don't think I've seen any of her other films, but I thought it was at least interesting. And this was really bad. This like. The script basically, it's about a dad who was in prison coming home. It basically plays out exactly how you think it's going to play out. It is one of those from the fest that has a child actor that fully ruins the film. I mean, this kid is really bad. Even Brian Cox can't really save a lot of the lines. I don't know if I blame like the actors necessarily. It's just a really cliche script. With a lot of, it's very out of touch with how kids talk, which was what stood out to me. Is like it was trying. The script for this kid was like so out of touch. It was like just sitting on the edge of his bed playing video games. I'm like, that's not what kids do. I don't know. It was just borderline unwatchable, to be honest.
Like, what should the kid have been doing, Karsten?
It was really I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it just because like there was very few redeeming qualities for me.
It is one of those movies though that, at least based on what I've heard and the general letterbox sentiment is pretty negative on this movie. I do wonder how sometimes these movies get into the big festivals. Like, is it just on the back of Catherine Hardwicke's name or what?
Yeah.
Can you see any redeeming quality?
There's like a sincere story here. I mean, about like a dad trying to like undo his past and trying to like rekindle this relation. But it's like, it doesn't really take that very tired plot into any interesting directions. It's kind of exactly how you think he's going to do it. Plays video games with the kid at one point, you know, like I don't know. It wasn't interesting. It was just kind of unfortunate. Yeah.
She just needs to go back to only directing things involving teenagers. You got Twilight,
Right.
13, Lords of Dogtown. Like, she had a great run there for a few years.
That's what confused me, is because like she gets the teenage experience in Twilight.
It's just like, it's so authentic.
This is me on screen. And this, I was like,
hey, you like the rain, girl? Karsten.
This, I was like, has she ever walked into any middle school before? Like, it was.
Well, that sounded kind of weird.
Well, let's hope maybe she did.
Karsten, what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, that was. Didn't like this movie.
I think a lot of your reactions to Prisoner's Daughter were similar to a lot of my reactions to The Son, the new movie from Florian Zeller about a 17-year-old who is having a tough time and goes to live with his dad, and how sad we should feel for the dad for having to deal with a sad son. It's as we said, the new movie from Florian Zeller, who made a pretty awesome movie called The Father not too long ago.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened here, because this is like the opposite in terms of quality.
Yeah,
not from more than just like one perspective. The script is really bad. I feel like the direction is extremely tame, and the acting also, like, yeah, maybe you get some charisma off of Hugh Jackman and Laura Dern because they're Hugh Jackman and Laura Dern, but the boy they cast as the son here, Zen McGrath, is just really, really terrible, and I don't want to pin it all on him and his talents, because he has this dialogue that's written as if this is not a 17-year-old, but a 40-year-old who just recently learned English.
Yeah.
Like, the inability to articulate themselves just manifests in this weird, stuttery, fake crying performance where all he can say is he's sad and he doesn't know why, and it's because life. And it again made me think, like, has Florian Zeller ever spoken to a teenager? Has Florian Zeller ever spoken to a depressed person? Yeah. Has Florian Zeller had a conversation with a human recently? Like, what really? I don't really know what happened.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I liked The Father a lot.
Yeah,
and this movie's awful. Amanda,
really
you thought so too.
Yeah, I don't know if I hate it. This is one of those, I actually start hating it more the more I think about it. Like, the more. So basically, it also started with him coming out being like, I really want to draw attention and point out the importance of like the epidemic of teenage depression. So he's setting out to allegedly address this, but it has like nothing really to do with teenage depression. Again, it has to do with like a parent reacting to a child with teenage depression. And I think that could work in certain ways. I do think that parents don't always understand why sometimes kids are just sad, why they're just upset, why they are going through depression, and teenagers have a hard time expressing that sometimes. And there doesn't always have to be a reason. Like, you can be clinically depressed. You can have a variety of different problems that mean, like, I don't know why I'm upset and don't like living, but that is my reality. And a lot of parents will react to anger. They will get angry at you. They'll be like, "Would you have no reason to be like this?" And it upsets them. So I think there could have been an interesting way to address that. They didn't do it. This kid felt manipulative in a way that made it impossible to sympathize with him. So if you're trying to point out the importance of like teenager depression and why it needs to be acknowledged, you have now created like the least likable face of teenage depression. It was just really, really bad, horrible performance. And again, a lot of that performance being so bad comes down to bad dialogue and writing. Somebody basically made the point that it feels like they took the play that it's based off and ran it through Google Translate. And then that's what they gave the kid to work with. But it feels worse than that. It's like they keep stressing that he doesn't know why he's sad, doesn't know why he's sad. And then suddenly it's divorce. It all goes back to the divorce. I'm like, well, that's a reason now. And isn't a reason why someone would be this level of like miserable with it was just very weird stances it was taking on things, horrible performances, and like I said, manipulative in a way when he's acting that he comes across more like a kid with a drug addiction, where parents are like, we got to stop giving you money, we got to make sure that you're doing this and blah blah blah, and then they're like, he's like, no, you like don't understand, it's not for drugs, like I actually just need, like, I need a book for school, that's why I need $100, it's a book. And that's the way that his performance ends up feeling, more like a kid who has a drug addiction trying to manipulate parents than a kid who is like just desperately in pain,
trying to communicate.
Trying to communicate. It's just bad, and like we don't really spend any solid amount of time with the kids, so there's really no attempts at nuance to even try to like get to the heart of what that experience might be. It's very bad.
It's so incurious about the sun, which is weird for a movie called The Sun. Cybotico in the live stream is asking, what are your thoughts on the ending? And like, I don't think we want to spoil anything, but just in broad strokes, I think it's the kind of thing that in a better movie could have worked, but here it's so horribly obviously manipulative. And like, I heard a bunch of sniffles around.
I got it too. I sniffled a little bit. It got me a little bit.
Like
before I was angry.
Intellectually, it's like a thought-provoking, sad ending, but like the way that they got there is so unbelievable and so cheap and just bad. I don't.
And then you're just like, Vanessa Kirby was trying, guys. She was trying. But no, you couldn't listen to the one that was closer to.
Yeah.
I felt the same with Timothée Chalamet in Beautiful Boy. I tried to feel empathy towards him, but I couldn't. See, I feel the opposite. I actually did feel the empathy for Chalamet in Beautiful Boy, but because that's actually my head is thinking that. I'm like, this would be like if they had done Beautiful Boy really badly, except it's depression and not like a drug addiction. But I guess I could kind of see why that would be not wanting to feel empathy towards him.
Chase says this is now his most anticipated for the rest of the year.
Let's go.
Have you postulated that maybe the intention of the film was to try to make you miserable by how bad it was? That
right.
We're not teenagers.
Put me in his shoes. Right.
Yeah. It's really meta. If you think about it.
No, he thought he made art here. He thought he did something here. You can tell.
Yeah, it is big swing and a miss. And I guess the jury's out on the Holy Spirit, whether or not it'll be good or bad. Maybe it'll be.
I need the Holy Spirit to cleanse me from this movie. So.
All right, let's go to what I guess was the opening night film of TIFF, which is a little surprising considering how big of a festival it is. And I don't know if any of us had heard of this film before TIFF announced it, but this is an upcoming film that it will be going to Netflix about the story of sisters from Syria who journeyed all the way to Germany to escape the war and try to make the 2016 Rio Olympics as swimmers. A really fascinating true life story. The documentary on this would probably be absolutely incredible. Turning it into a narrative is a little bit weird because while there are elements that I found to be very moving and beautifully portrayed in terms of their immigration story and the arduous path that they took to get from Syria to Germany, it also gets sort of boxed into this inspirational sports drama thing that feels a lot less vital and a lot less interesting. It rather than in the first half of the movie, you get these really amazing sequences, particularly the sequence where they cross the Aegean Sea in a little dinghy boat. And it's more than just they're at peril there. I think the filmmaking is really excellent. There's these images of them in the water contrasted with them doing their swimming that really stuck with me. A whole sequence where you see just the huge amount of life jackets that have been left over from previous migrants. That is one of the most just, I don't know, heart-wrenching images that I've seen in a narrative film recently. And then it's combined with this kind of very talky drama of people who just are stubborn and don't want to see the other side of a situation. So it is sort of a tale of two movies for me here, where I liked a lot of things that happened in The Swimmers, but ultimately it felt a little bit normal, a little bit routine, a little bit like other movies, which is bizarre given like what an interesting story it was. But given that it's going to come to Netflix not too long from now, I definitely think it's worth it if you do find yourself moved by the occasional inspired by a true story movie.
Yeah, everything I've seen about it, it seems like the perfect Netflix film.
Yeah. It's
like
pretty much a good
thing
Netflix
to watch,
film.
I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's sequences that are maybe a little tougher, but like overall, it'll leave you feeling good about it.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It's like it seems like a heartwarming kind of Netflix thing where at the end of it, you come out feeling great.
Totally.
You're like, the world is amazing.
All right, let's dive into Midnight Madness, and the movie that I think we've all seen by now, except for Jeff, is Pearl, the latest from Ty West, approved by Martin Scorsese, and the continuation of X, or prequel to X. Art and I talked about it a little bit on our last stream. So, Karsten, let me start with you. What was your reaction to Pearl?
I didn't really vibe with this movie. I think it aesthetically very cool. Like I like the vibe it's going for with like this what is it, like 50s kind of old school look.
1918.
Oh,
yeah, like old
1918.
Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It was like it just didn't really do what I wanted. Like as a horror film, I wanted it to be a little bit scarier. I wanted the kills to be more interesting. I don't think Pearl is that interesting of a character, is I think the core of this issue. Because like
I agree.
People are comparing this to a lot of like John Waters movies of like the whole like I want to be a star one day,
Right.
and then it goes about it in the most vulgar way possible. And like I just think Pearl is like so uninteresting compared to like a John Waters character or like most versions of this character in horror movies. And like X was just so much more interesting because it was like all these like porn stars, and it was like kind of characters that you don't see that often in horror movies. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I still didn't love X, but it at least felt like it had this unique thing going for it that, I don't know, Pearl just didn't really introduce anything that I haven't already seen before. I thought the kills were kind of unsatisfying, and I was just bored, honestly. I was just kind of bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda,
pretty much
you
exactly,
were...
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I feel. Like, I just don't find Pearl that interesting of a character. It did hit moments of like such extreme secondhand cringe.
Yeah.
Like before a couple things where you're just kind of like, I'm sorry, baby doll, not everyone's a star, but yeah, it like I said, I think this probably would have been really good if this had been like a little thing that got added to like a Blu-ray version of X, or some kind of like live stream edition, that it was like a little prequel that went on before that. Like if you would just really cut it down and condensed it, because like Pearl's not that interesting a character, and turns out, you know, her history wasn't that interesting either. But
No.
super. I saw it at the midnight premiere, thankfully, because, well, not thankfully, but Karsten decided he didn't want to see it at midnight, so I usurped his ticket. Thank you very much. So like the vibes of the audience there was great. You know, we got the clapping to the Bulgari ad, which eventually spread outside Midnight Madness, which was nice. Then you got the big reveal for Maxine at the end, which was exclusive to TIFF, right? Because like that had already played other places, but no one else got it. So that was really cool, and I'm excited for that because I like Mia Goth's character in X. So that's exciting. But yeah, I would follow pretty much where Karsten does, where I just kind of like find this movie in general like too long for what it is and just a little underwhelming. So
yeah,
kind
comedy. Yeah.
That's funny either. I love the credits. I love her monologue.
The credits were great.
Yeah, the credits were great.
And that's the thing about it.
In the movie.
That's the thing about it. It has those moments. She has that monologue, which is awesome. Maybe not quite on the level of Rebecca Hall in Resurrection, but still like a pretty awesome monologue. But it is sort of like a movie that it has its moments, but then has these long stretches where it's sort of just hanging out with an insufferable character, and she's going to yell a lot. And I don't know. I did appreciate how much of the movie happened in broad daylight, which, you know, brings me back to like Midsummer and stuff like that. I think there are a lot of movies that can still be horrific, can still be scary, but don't have to obfuscate everything in like darkness. So I liked that about it, but it was also ultimately like, for a Midnight Madness movie, for a slasher origin story, a little bit light on the blood
light.
and gore.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with everybody in like Mia Goth was amazing. Even that monologue, I mean, she's great in the monologue, but I'm like, what is actually being accomplished in this like 8 minutes of like
just my husband.
I'm like, she is like, props to her because she like does so much with like nothing, in my opinion. I don't know.
She also wrote the script, which I found really surprising. I know that this was, you know, it's got
Ty.
the pandemic
with Ty.
Accents to it. Obviously,
I mean, if you
it's comparing to the 1900s,
if you look at it as sort of what they originally intended it for, as like an exercise for her to know more about the character, so it informs her performance in X. Like, it's cool that it does give you that background, but compared to X, which is about a time and about a place and about a style of film, it just, there's a lot less meat on the bone in Pearl. So I had a fun time with it, but it's definitely a lot more disposable, I think, than X was. And yeah, I think like Amanda, I'm also really looking forward to Maxine. It takes place in a world maybe I know a little bit better, or at least have more interest in seeing.
It's gonna be my favorite of the three, I think. So, yeah.
We'll see. All right, let's stick with the Midnight Madness and talk about Project Wolf Hunting, which was an early morning screening for Amanda.
Yeah, yes, it was.
How'd
Am I the
that
only
go?
one who ended up seeing it?
Yeah, I couldn't.
This is
manage
not
that in the morning.
I have an interesting anecdote about this one. Oh, look, I'm the first popular review. But yeah, this is a whole lot of movie for 8 a.m. But yeah, it's really interesting. A like foreign fan page, like a Korean fan page, I assume, basically took something I said on Twitter and made it sound like I thought that this movie was the best experience you could have in a movie. But I said, make sure to, if you want to see it, get into the midnight screening, because that'll be the best experience. But they've been taking that quote and being like, Amanda the Jedi has said that Project Wolf Hunting is the best possible experience.
This is your Mother Schmuckers review part two.
It is my mother. Like, I can't win with the pull quotes, but this is like, it's way too long. It goes through like 3 different like stages of like, you're transporting these criminals, and then I don't want to like spoil it, but then it gets like really weirdly violent with one particular character that I just find annoying and didn't enjoy that aspect, and then it turns into some like MK Ultra type thing, and it just keeps going. And then I think they left it open for a sequel. It's like, I finished that movie and I was just exhausted. It's like over 2 hours long, or just around the 2-hour mark. Exhausted is probably the best way to word it. I'm sure the midnight crowd loved it. I'm sure it was amazing at midnight, but at 8:45 in the morning, not so much.
Not the best possible experience.
Not the best possible experience. No.
Is this like a Takashi Miike style, just over the top thing, or is it campy? What's going on here?
I like Takashi Miike, at least a good chunk of Takashi Miike. Like First Love from 2019's Tiff was one of my favorite movies coming out of that one. I really enjoyed it. I had a blast. Yeah. This has aspects of that. It is very bloody, but not necessarily gory. It's like, basically you get somebody who gets like stabbed once, and then suddenly it's just like somebody dunked just red water over top of them, and then it's just like pooling out of them in droves. It's very violent. It's very violent. It's very brutal. Big sound design stuff of like crunching sounds if somebody gets kicked particularly hard. But just big big issues there. So I don't think it's as fun as like a Takashi Miike, but it has like elements of it. I think it had a better setup. Again, I don't really want to spoil something, but there's just like an aspect of it I didn't end up liking. So other people probably do love it, but I don't think anybody, I feel like it's hard to argue that it isn't just way too fucking long for what it is. But
overstays its welcome.
It overstays its welcome. And then you find it seems like they're setting up for a sequel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. More Midnight Madness. Let's talk a little bit about Sick, movie that I thought was pretty sick. This one is directed by John Himes, and it's about a pair of college students who decide to self-quarantine at their family's lake house in the midst of the pandemic. So yes, this is a movie firmly set in a post-COVID or still COVID world. This is, I think, in the like months after the initial lockdowns, or maybe even like right after the initial lockdowns. But I think the thing here is that we've seen some films that try to incorporate COVID stuff and try to at least make mention of it. A lot of movies ignore it, but of the films that have done some like COVID adjacent material, this is one of the first ones that I think not only implements it effectively, but cleverly too. Like it heightens the stakes of the plot. It informs the way that the characters interact with each other. And it's not just sort of like cheap jokes at the sake of like a familiar idea. And ultimately, it's not the reason to see this movie, because the reason to see it is a excellently directed slasher film. This film kind of does like almost like the Upgrade style camera, where when limbs move, the camera will move with it in a way that makes all the movements really dynamic, makes the confrontations feel that much more dangerous. Every swing of a knife feels like it might kill somebody in this movie. I don't know. I thought it was extremely, extremely effective in just like this smaller package. Just one of the most brutal and visceral slasher films I've seen in quite some time. So I would highly, highly recommend Sick. Like it's pretty simple, but very effective. I like this
I don't know
one
if you saw who the writer is, but it's Kevin Williamson who did the
Oh,
original
yeah.
Scream. So it's literally the master of slashers.
Oh shit!
In my opinion.
That's
why I'm curious to catch in Chicago.
Yeah, I really wanted to catch it digitally, and then I kind of somehow forgot to like actually sit down and watch it, which is a bummer because it was on my list. But then anytime something was on my list that had the digital availability, I just assumed that I'd be able to get a screener for it, and then that was not the case.
Right? Yeah.
Those bastards. But maybe I could get one for this. I haven't reached out
I'm
yet.
excited for it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Big fan of Kevin Williamson.
Yeah, it's a very fun time.
We can get the Scream remake we needed.
Yeah, please. Please. I'm desperate.
All right, let's talk a little bit about The Blackening.
Yeah.
This is a film about a group of black friends who go away for a weekend in a cabin in the woods. Directed by Tim Story, which is kind of like a
Tom and Jerry, famously directed.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like an asset or a detractor. Given
I know for a fact that's a detractor of a qualifier for someone's work.
It does come with a script from Dwayne Perkins, I think is one of the co-writers on it, and I find him funny. So, Jeff, where did you land on this? Was it funny or a little bit Tom and Jerry-ish?
Real quick, on Tim Story's page, there was it said there's a link to the Monopoly movie, which Carson and I were investigating. And it doesn't exist, but it was about Kevin Hart supposed to be from Baltic Avenue or something.
Oh my God.
Anyways,
there's going to be a smash.
Yeah, if that ever happens, I'm seeing that in theaters. But The Blackening. The Blackening is based on a sketch, like a Comedy Central sketch from a Chicago improv group that I've seen called Repeat. And I had some friends that were like in that improv group actually, so I kind of like, vaguely know. I've only met Dwayne Perkins like once for like 2 seconds, but yeah, so it's based on that sketch, and I thought it was like a very smart idea of the fact that they always kill like the black person first, and it's like if everyone's black, who do they kill? Which is such a funny like just concept for a film. But I will say though, I think the writing is excellent by Dwayne Perkins. I would say Tim Story's direction is kind of weird, where it isn't really directed as like a sketch or a horror. It's like somewhere in between. I feel like the writing was funny enough on its own where you could have committed to directing it like straight up as a horror film. But it's a really fun time. I'm sure seeing this in a theater, I saw the press screening, so I didn't see the Midnight Madness screening. I'm sure that was really fun. Yeah, I mean, it's not
it
like
definitely
doing anything.
It definitely helps to see it with a crowd, I think.
Yeah. I didn't think it was doing anything like, that original besides the premise. But it's just a really fun movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm bummed I missed it.
It's definitely one that also like succeeds partially on the strength of its cast. I think there's a lot of very funny people in this. Yvonne Orji and Jay Farrow show up briefly, and there's a very funny joke that they make at the expense of their brief appearance. The one who obviously stole the show for me is Jermaine Fowler, who is doing like a different type of performance than I think we're used to from him. I think in a lot of movies, he's kind of set up to be either the cool guy or the kind of like trying to be chill, but gets made fun of a little bit, dude. He's more of just like a weird outcast nerd. His pronunciation of Hyundai is still with me. But it is like, again, a film that I think kind of works in moments and not necessarily like from start to finish. It doesn't have like this cohesion or this flow that you would like. It does. There's like a lack of like a rising tension that I felt like was missing. And maybe that is just in the way that story puts this together, that it doesn't really feel like one thing leads to the next. It kind of feels like they do one thing and then they do the next thing. But ultimately though, the type of comedy this is, like, it's sort of in the mold of like the scary movie parody movies, in that like those movies aren't necessarily the best like films either, but you pack them in with enough jokes that work and they're still memorable. I think, this might stick with some people because there are just very funny moments, even if it doesn't necessarily feel like a cohesive film from start to finish.
Yeah. And I agree that Jermaine Fowler was the best part of this film.
So better than Tom and Jerry.
It's better than Tom and Jerry.
Okay, good.
Let's talk about another Midnight Madness movie that unfortunately none of us saw. It is The People's Joker, directed by Vera Drew, about an aspiring clown grappling with her gender identity as she combats a fascistic caped crusader. This one, very notably, had one screening at Toronto before it was ultimately cast aside by the powers that be, not through a cease and desist, we learned, but through a strongly worded letter delivered to Vera Drake, suggesting that they not screen the film at TIFF and subsequent festivals. Vera has pulled the film from places like Fantastic Fest, where it was supposed to play following its TIFF schedule. Jeff, I know this is one of the ones that you had in your press in your schedule to try and go to the press screening. So I don't know. Did you have any reaction?
I was hyping it up to everyone. I mean, because I just watched the trailer and I was like, we gotta go see People's Joker. I know Karsten had other plans anyways, but other people like the Oscar expert guys, I was like, People's Joker, and they're like, what's that? And I'm like, trust me, go to the People's Joker.
I was gonna be there with you, man. I was gonna be right there with you for that 9 p.m.
And then they sent that email like the night before that were like, oh, we rescheduled the press screening till like 8 a.m. on the 13th or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's because it actually had a prime time press screening, which I was amazed that they were gonna have the press screening at 8 p.m. And I was like so ready for it, and then no.
And then I was like, no, I can still fit it into my schedule with one of those morning ones, but then no. Had I known, I would have fought really hard to get into the midnight. Yeah, just to see this.
It's pretty hilarious how WB continues to like bring a bunch of hype to movies by refusing to let people watch them. They're just building up interest in a thing by making it like, I don't know, scandalous to try and catch it. I feel like this will see the light of day at some point, whether that's just like a YouTube release or something a little bit more official. But it's just pretty frustrating and upsetting that they can block this movie from even film. Like, it's one thing to block it from a wider distribution deal, but to not allow it to play in a film festival is so
Right.
like ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And who are you really serving? Like, what brand are you really protecting by not letting a few cinephiles in Toronto go see it?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like-
Props to Tiff for not immediately pulling it though, for letting that midnight. I wonder if they got like whispers of it, and that's why they canceled that first press showing, because they figured that if there had been any kind of showing of it, the backlash would have gotten too high to even have one of the public screenings. So they chose to just prioritize the first, like that midnight one first.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I got the impression of, but
And it's cool that they got to get that premiere too. But hopefully we can free the People's Joker sometime soon and finally catch it. Let's talk about a movie that
just curious of what they were. Sorry, I was curious about what they were trying to protect with like the IP of the Joker. Like, who was gonna conflate that as being part of the normal, cinematic universe?
That's the thing, right? Like, is
People are
anybody
dumb.
really gonna?
no, people are dumb, guys. People are really dumb. Like they'd be bringing up like the Joker's daughter comics and stuff and be like, you guys?
I saw this one guy who was mass responding to people talking about it with the definition of parody, insisting that this couldn't be a parody because he didn't find it funny. It's the kind of reactions we're getting.
Oh, that's fun. People are fun. Just so
People are
quirky.
fun. All right, let's talk about something fun. Weird, the Al Yankovic story, starring Daniel Radcliffe as Al Yankovic. This is a biopic, unlike any other biopic before it. Jeff, you got to catch this one too. What did you make
with
out
Karsten?
What did you make out of this Roku original?
Props to Roku for having such original content.
Bringing these stories to life. Roku.
Yeah.
Roku channel, it's going to surpass Netflix, I think, next year.
Yes, sir.
No, I loved it. It's the first. I'll say the first half is for me stronger than the second half. It does kind of like a bit of a 180 in terms of going from playing it as a very straight parody of a biopic into kind of becoming a bit of like an action film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a really fun movie. Karsten, I don't know. What do you think, Karsten?
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. I've been comparing this a lot to, and it's not just me, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yeah.
Both tonally and as like these like kind of tribute films to the person they're about. And I think this is like the perfect tribute to Weird Al. I mean, he wrote it, obviously, like he's got a huge part in it, so obviously that's the case. But yeah, I'm with Jeff on this one. It's like first 45 minutes, really. I mean, you were sitting next to me. I was laughing basically the entire time.
So good.
Yeah, I couldn't even hear the dialogue over Karsten's laughter.
Right. It was truly disruptive. But I really loved it. And then, I think the more it goes on, I think it's just a tad too long. Like the bit kind of wears itself out, and the more it shoots for the absurdity, the less kind of funny and it gets. Because you're right, it's like when it plays itself so straight, it's like this is ridiculous and hilarious. But Daniel Radcliffe, amazing,
so good. Yeah. I caught the midnight for this one, which was an experience in its own right. Just floral shirts everywhere. I realized that I dress exactly like Weird Al with the checkered Vans and all. It was a great day. But I do think, like you guys are saying, I feel like the longer it goes, it does kind of lose a little bit of its steam as it's going. There's a couple of jokes that they pull out towards the end that are great, like the eat it joke. Just like the commitment to that is like so fucking funny. Just oh my god. And like me assuming that they would have had to have run some of this by Madonna, and then like somebody actually asked, like, has Madonna seen this? And then being like, not unless she's here. So it's just like really fun. And like the only way you can do a Weird Al biopic is to make a parody biopic.
Yeah.
So
Well, the other thing I was thinking of the whole time was that I don't understand if they were to make a real biopic of Weird Al, what you'd even include, because he had such a there's not a lot of
you got to dress it up
no
somehow.
turmoil.
That's exactly it. Yeah, he's a pretty chill dude outside the fact.
Would have been the most boring biopic of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, I maybe should have figured, given this is a Roku original and not one that I think is going to be in movie theaters, but it sounds a little bit more like a stoned on the couch movie than a go see it opening night kind of film.
It's either kind of like it does like the Kevin Smith thing where you go on tour with it and it Weird Al's at every single showing and it's like a party every time, or it is like you are just drunk or stoned on the couch watching this movie. Like, because I do think an audience makes a difference. I feel like they even anticipated knowing that certain jokes were going to get big reactions, so they'd make sure to, like, somebody would say something and they'd pan around to some different characters so that you'd have time to get the laugh out before the next line started. But there's definitely some lines I missed because people were just laughing too hard.
Yeah.
Awesome. Still excited to catch that one. One that I've been recommending to just about everybody is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. This is one of two films we're going to talk about in the platform section. This one comes from Daniel Goldhaber, who previously made the film Cam, which I think we were fans of on Intercut when that came out a couple of years ago. I think this film puts him into like a whole different league, though. This is an extremely well-made film, a amazing eco-terrorism thriller about this crew pulling off a caper to harm the oil industry, as they call it, as a means of self-defense. There's just so much to like about this film. I love how unapologetically radical it is in its political ambitions and the message it's trying to portray. I love that it doesn't really waste a moment. I think the pacing of this thing is so expertly done in that you just get these flashes into these characters enough that you have your bearings, you have a toehold, and you know what everybody's about, why they're there, and the purpose of this all. You know, it's not leaving too much to be for you to try and figure out, but it's also not over explaining itself. And just as a thrill ride, like, it's so expertly done, the way that as they go along, things will get in their way, but be like understandable challenges, and nothing feels a little bit manipulated. It all feels like it's of a piece. It just hit me so hard. I thought this one worked so well. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I loved when the credits kicked in and how they did too. I just felt like electric coming out of this one. I felt like, you know, like goosebumps coming out of the movie here.
Yeah. When you said eco-terrorism thriller, that was one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Right? I think the director described it as an eco-terrorism Ocean's 11, which is like, if that's not the coolest four words I've ever heard, then I don't know what is. Man, this is a good movie. Amanda, you saw this one too. What was your reaction to it?
Yeah, pretty similar. I think you definitely ended up liking it a little bit more than I did, but I do think some of it's a little bit clean. It's based on a book, and I gotta check. I'm not sure what age group the book is aimed at. There's like a few pieces.
It's like a literal manifesto that it's adapted from. Like an environmental activist wrote a manifesto, and they're like, okay, let's make it a movie.
Sick. Okay, because I honestly, when I remember seeing this in the lineup, I thought it was a documentary. I assumed that this was going to be a documentary based on actual like environmental activists or terrorists or whatever, however they want to word themselves, because they actually have that conversation in the movie.
Yeah.
But then I found out it was a narrative one, and I like you were saying, just the way that they tell the story, how they kind of build through the progression of what they're doing, and then it'll cut back to give you those glimpses of like what led to each of these people being involved in this and wanting to be involved in this. I think some of the planning, I was like, would this really work in real life? But if the manifesto, if it happened, I guess, like,
I mean, it's also a little bit like Ocean's 11-ish or any heist movie, in that like it probably wouldn't work that cleanly, but like they do a good job of convincing you that this would work. I just was like, I was really rocked by it. I think it's really cool to see something that has such a transgressive attitude be given this kind of treatment and not sort of apologize for it. You know, I think back to movies like The East, where they have similar ideas, but they don't necessarily go all the way in terms of trying to espouse those ideas. And to me, this is like, a heist movie by way of First Reformed, right? Like this is a doom scrolling movie, and it somehow left me feeling good at the end, which I was not ready for.
Yeah, I thought it
really-
was really good.
Really cool.
And
movie.
interesting characters and kind of showing the different like types of personalities that might get involved in this and not really kind of shying away from some of their like worse potential character
Right.
attributes and stuff. And yeah, interesting stuff.
Very cool. Riceboy Sleeps, another movie that I put in my top 10 of TIFF, and I talked about it in the last video, so I won't spend too much time on it now. But the thing that I said then is that this one kind of had echoes of Moonlight to me in terms of the way the story is told, the kind of gentle hand holding through his life, and you get different, like, you see different sectors as he grows up, and you're kind of, it's left to you to sort of bridge the gaps in like what you didn't see in the story. But to me, this is a film that's about being an outsider and also finding your voice in community. And I think there's just some moments here that are so beautifully done, particularly the stuff around the mother, that, you know, broke my heart. I like this one a lot. I think this is one of those movies that you see at a film festival, and it's not necessarily like at the tip of your tongue in terms of the films you want to tell people about, but it is one of the films that really stuck with me and moved me and you know, fills out a festival experience, because it's got to be more than those headliners that really blow you away, right? Okay, so those are the platform movies. We got one section left, and that's the biggest one, these special presentations. So a lot of exciting movies to come up. Let's start with Amanda. I think she's the only one of us who saw Biosphere, the new mumblecore Mark Duplass movie. This one also starring Sterling K. Brown, about a not too distant future where the last two men on Earth must adapt and evolve to save humanity. An intriguing premise, and I am a sucker for a Mark Duplass mumblecore comedy. But Amanda, what did you think about Biosphere?
Really interesting premise. Kind of goes in a direction that you would not ever anticipate it to. It handles some of that really well, and then I think it handles some of that really poorly. And then I don't think it quite stuck the landing. But I really can't say anything about it, because I feel like if you start talking about any of it, you kind of lose what makes it so weird and unique, to kind of get into any deeper plot for it. But some really good performances here. They don't really answer any questions as to like what happened to the world. Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
Does this play more towards the like awkward comedy sort of side that I think a lot of Duplass movies get to, or is this maybe a little more like introspective? Like I'm thinking on the term, like from Creep to the one I love. Like, where does this land?
It's definitely more like comedy. It's more on the comedy, a weird, awkward comedy side of it. And it's definitely trying to make you uncomfortable with certain things in certain moments. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
Okay.
It has aspects to it that I feel like it's like really hitting on something, and then other aspects where I'm like, y'all probably should have talked to somebody about this one. I don't know. But yeah, and I think it tries to kind of hit certain levels of introspection in areas, and it doesn't like quite deliver it in the way that I think it wants to or thinks it does by the end. I'll probably check it out again at some point, but yeah, it's sure something. It's sure something.
Good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the latest from Koreeda, film I'm really looking forward to at New York Film Fest. This is Broker, which of course is with Sung Kang-ho as well. Jeff and Karsten got to catch this one. Amanda, did you as well?
I saw it at Con.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. All right.
We talked about it.
So Karsten, what was your reaction
to?
Right. What was your reaction to Broker, Karsten?
I was blown away by it. I was kind of talking to you guys. I think it's my favorite of his. I think it's not too dissimilar to a lot of what he's done. I mean, it's families doing weird doing weird crimes.
He's got a niche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of a relief, because I didn't really like his last one with Ethan Hawke and I forget Catherine Deneuve or something. But
yeah.
I don't know. Didn't love it, but this is like kind of a return to what he's familiar with, and because of just how much he's done it, how many perspectives he's playing with here, like I feel like you get just his most like nuanced take on like what a family is, why families exist, and and kind of like tackles all those questions. And I don't know. I think it's funny. It's really tense. It's very quiet, but not like never boring. Like it's very thrilling for how peaceful it comes across. And yeah, I just there wasn't a lot that I didn't love about this. Song Kang-ho plays like he's just so good at being this kind of guy that's like pretending to be something he isn't. Like he's just really good at this character. I don't know. I fucking love this movie. Yeah,
it's funny because you just defined acting. He's so good at pretending to be something he isn't.
Well, he's acting as a guy acting. Yeah, I don't know. It was great.
No, I agreed. I mean, if you like shoplifters, you're gonna like this film.
Yeah.
It's almost the same film. I mean, I think it's different enough to warrant being a different film, but like, it's kind of the same film.
Do you agree with Karsten that it's maybe his best?
I've only seen this in Shoplifters.
From those two?
From those two, yeah, I agree. I liked it a little bit better. I think it's a little easier to watch. Doesn't pull my heart in as many directions that I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, Shoplifters is great, but that is also a devastating movie.
Yeah.
All right, something that's probably a lot easier to watch. Art, you've seen this one too. Bros, the latest with Nicholas Stoller, written and starring Billy Eichner. Art, we haven't heard from you in a little while since you just saw Bros yesterday.
Yeah, fresh out.
What was your reaction?
It was solid. This is another Judd Apatow produced comedy. You get to see a lot of his main slate of people come in here to do a couple of cameos, but it's supposed to be a flip on the romantic, the rom-com genre from Billy Eichner's point of view, who really, it's not that he hates rom-coms, he's just like, rom-coms aren't for me. He's like almost an antagonist to the rom-com. He's in a rom-com, hating that he's in a rom-com the entire movie. If you're a Billy Eichner fan, I mean, this is almost like a biopic for him. He is venting. There's so many jokes in this movie. There's a Dear Evan Hansen joke that I don't know how long he's had in his pocket for a second, but there were a lot of jokes that catch you off guard. I thought it was funny through and through. It gets emotional towards the end of it. It is 2 hours, so like a lot of Judd Apatow movies that are pushing that 2-hour mark for a comedy, it's, you know, dipping in and out of being just jokes a minute to then like a very serious, you know, relationship story. But it was solid. I saw it with a packed crew where everybody was there with their couples. I think Alina and I were like, Alina was like one of 3 women who was there. She was laughing the entire time as well. And yeah, everybody liked it. There was a grass joke that got a guy a little too much. So it was one of those screenings where you're laughing more at a dude laughing at a joke that he's relating to a bit too much. But no, I would recommend this one. They're, I think, still doing a bunch of screenings. GoFobo and Regal like partnered up, and that's how I was able to go see it, because the press screening isn't until the 27th. And I'm like, I'm just gonna do the Regal thing, and I was able to catch it last night. So it's definitely one that you want to catch with a big crowd. But then that might also be a bad thing because you might miss a lot of the jokes. So yeah, pretty solid movie.
Yeah, Jeff, you were at the world premiere. Was it hard to hear all the jokes at the world premiere?
Sometimes it was, actually.
You know?
But yeah, like Art was saying, though, it is really fun to see it in a crowd, especially a crowd that's comprised of a group of people that the film, you know, is about, and it's people that haven't seen their lives represented in this way. Like, because obviously there's not that many like rom-coms about same-sex couples. Yeah, so it's just like seeing a group of people enjoy a film that much because it's something they haven't seen before is like a really fun experience. So that, I would say that's the biggest argument for seeing it in a theater.
Because even Fire Island, which is solid, that's on Hulu. They never got a theatrical release. So
I was going to say there have been some weird sort of like positioning of this film against Fire Island, is like, well, Fire Island came first, but this one got a theatrical release. Karsten, I don't know if you've seen both of those movies, but do you have a preference between Fire Island or Bros? Do you like them both? What's where you lean?
I'm a bigger Bros fan for sure. I mean, Fire Island's good, but this is kind of like how I've been. This is a film that I've just like grown to love the more I think about it, which is kind of unexpected for such a like by the books rom-com. Right. But I think just the fact that it feels like a return to the big blockbuster rom-com that like you can throw on any day, and is like, I think the fact that you miss some of the jokes is like a great thing. It's like I'd rather have a film like this with too many goddamn jokes than like something that's like not like kind of hit or miss. So yeah, I mean, I like Fire Island. They're bound to be compared, obviously. But like, I think this has it just is something I can like put on a little bit more. It's a little bit more rewatchable.
Okay, cool.
Like, I don't know. I think Fire Island, like I got what I wanted out of just the first viewing, whereas this is like, I could just keep rediscovering jokes over and over again. This is a great comfort watch. Yeah, maybe
like a little bit more in the mold of those other Apatovian comedies, where films like Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Get Him to the Greek, where I know I've rewatched those plenty of times, just because like the joke density means that you'll always have some fun stuff to.
They re-released those movies. It was like Bros Presents.
Yeah, I saw that.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So they've been doing a bunch of screenings leading up to it. Also, Bo and Yang is in both movies.
That's another thing. Also, I just want to quickly say, like, all that aside, like, I think it's just a really well-made film. On top of that, like the first like gay club scene when they're at the nightclub and he like kind of they meet for the first time. It's a scene that goes on for a very long time, but it's just so good. It's like so well edited. It keeps getting better.
Like every time he disappears, you're like, what the?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's good. I don't know. I was just like, what a great movie this is. Yeah.
Awesome.
I saw it at this press screening. Even that had like really good energy. I kind of assumed that was something that a lot of people from the press were just going to be like, I guess we'll have to watch Bros so we can get our reviews out early. And like a couple of people did walk out, and honestly, some of them walked out during like steamier scenes, and I just wanted to be like, you're homophobic. It's fine. You didn't need to show up. You just didn't need to be here ever. You know? But yeah, it was a good time.
All right, so let's do a hard pivot from Bros to Brother, the story of Caribbean immigrants maturing into young men in Toronto's pulsing 1990s hip hop scene. Jeff, you caught this one before or after Bros?
Right before.
Okay, so Bros was the palate cleanser.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you said you liked this one too.
I did like it. Yeah. I mean, you know, kind of like what you said with Riceboy Sleeps, I saw a lot of similarities with Moonlight in this. You know, plays a lot with time. And I mean, there's a lot of thematic similarities. It's just obviously not as good as Moonlight.
Right. But not often that you get a Moonlight quality movie.
Right. That's the issue with it, is that it's like really similar to Moonlight. But I mean, the acting is really good. I mean, it's a very effective film. It's very sad. It's not one that you're going to want to watch with the whole family. But yeah, I mean, it's good though. If you like Moonlight, you'll like this.
Is there anything in particular that stood out to you? Is it like the performances?
Yeah, the performances were
the writing.
Yeah, the performances were great, I thought. Especially, you know, it with different. It's one of those films where there's, you know, young actors and old actors playing the same character, and it actually was done really well where they felt like the same person, which was nice. I don't think that's always the case.
Awesome. So we'll keep that one on the radar as well. Let's talk a little bit about Causeway. This is the new film starring Jennifer Lawrence, and kind of a return of sorts for her. Aside from Don't Look Up, this is one of the first films she's done in several years, and it kind of brings her back into the indie dramas where she first made her name. I think there's a lot of similarities between this film and Winter's Bone in that they're both about these like middle American young women who seek to escape sort of like an oppressive home. This one sees Jennifer Lawrence's character coming back from her time in the military and dealing with a traumatic brain injury, and also sort of navigating life back in her hometown with her mom and different people that she meets, most notably Brian Tyree Henry's character, who has some trauma of his own to get through. An interesting sort of hangout movie character piece. I thought that it maybe didn't go quite as deep into its ideas as I would have liked. I feel like it kind of touches on a lot of aspects, but ultimately doesn't have that much to say aside from sort of like a curiosity into them and like an empathetic lens. What ultimately is the strength of this movie are those performances from Jennifer Lawrence and Brian Tyree Henry, who are both really, really watchable whenever they're on screen. I think they just have a great quality to them as actors in what I thought to be was mostly a forgettable movie. Amanda, did you come out around where I did, or did you like Causeway a little bit more?
No, I'd say it probably fell about in the same spot, but I'm just going to say, I kept saying like, I'm really just excited to see Jennifer Lawrence back in like a movie and stuff. I forgot about Don't Look Up because
Yeah,
I've been saying,
what?
I've been like, yeah, I'm like just so excited to see her finally. It's
Acting.
It's been years.
It's been so long.
Since and then literally like 9 months ago, she was in like the biggest discourse movie, but oh well. I feel like I probably felt about the same where you are. I think it could have gone deeper into some of those ideas it was trying to stress, maybe a little bit into why she's like so desperately just trying to get back to a situation she was like just got out of and like almost died in. I felt like they didn't necessarily examine that as hard as they could have, because that's like one of the big things is that she's just really trying to get back overseas.
Right.
And they do kind of touch on some of it, but I think they could have done a little bit more with it in general. Really great performance out of her, though. It was just really nice to kind of see her down into not more subdued, but just more, this version. She so often plays these like very heightened characters, and I do love those characters. Tiffany from Silver Linings Playbook is actually one of my favorite performances of hers, but it was just kind of nice to see that she can bring a lot without actually doing a lot. So and just really solid performance there. But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. Like I'm not angry. It was probably the best I saw that day for movies, but it wasn't like great. So
yeah, I came away in the exact same spot where the performances it's a very watchable film, as Zach said. It's like you could watch that for hours, but it's like you're not taking that much away from it. It's just like you watch it and then you leave and you're like, all right, well that was a
movie.
Yeah,
you're just
acting
really
and cinematography
waiting
and
for
music.
There's like no escalation of anything throughout the entire film. It's just kind of this evolution of a relationship, and the performances again are great. It feels very genuine, but at the end of the day, like I go to movies to see something that I like. I feel like I could also witness that by just hanging out in like a park.
Yeah. Or watching some news or something. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Decision to Leave, the latest from Chan-wook Park. Very exciting movie that I think premiered back at Cannes. Karsten, I know you got to catch this one, and I think it was one of your favorites of the fest.
It's my favorite of the fest, I think.
Okay, great.
Which was kind of a surprise, but yeah, this is actually, it's been like my most anticipated of the year. I love a good police procedural, and I also love him as a director. And this is like what I really like. Something I really love about it is how, and you could kind of say this about Glass Onion too. Like he assumes the audience is smarter than the film itself, and like what the case is, who the killer is, and like manages to take you down a bunch of twists that I won't spoil, obviously, but that just like are so unique to him that I don't know. It really kept me on edge. Both, and that's just as like a crime perspective. Like the romance in this film is so well done. It's like one of the most romantic things. Specifically, like the last 20 minutes, I'm just like, God damn, that was that was insane. Like up there with like Portrait as far as just like how like I don't know how erotic some of it was without being like sex scenes. Like, there wasn't really any sex scenes, but it's like you feel it the whole movie.
You feel the intimacy. and just
so-
like
just like, yeah, just in the interrogation rooms, it's just like, oh my God.
the little
I don't know.
things.
He is just such a playful filmmaker, and I also think a lot of his past films have been so. We kind of talked about this, how I was a little nervous because I get sort of lost in his movies because of how many things there are to kind of keep track of, and this is a very straightforward one, and I feel like because of that, you can kind of focus on just like how playful a lot of his like editing and cinematography is. It's like just you really notice it when you're watching like 3 or 4 films a day, and then you see something like this, and you're like, this is like how it should be.
Right.
It's just so fun and imaginative, and like I just love this movie so much. It was like probably one of my favorites of his. It's like the cleanest, at least, if that makes sense. And yeah, I felt very moved by the end of it. One of my favorite like endings of any film this year, easily.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it was phenomenal.
Just getting me more and more excited to catch it.
Yeah. Also, weirdly, like the least packed screening, and I thought that was funny just
so
because
weird.
Really?
it was the premiere. Technically, like, he was there and everything. And yeah, it was like weirdly not that packed, just because so many people have already seen this movie because of online stuff, and like it's been at so many other festivals. But I was like, dude, this is the
It's so
place to
good.
be right now.
I thought it was sold out, but that was
Okay, a
another
lot of
weird
things
thing
said
with-
they were sold out, and then they weren't, and then even the
Yeah.
festival organizers were confused. So like before Glass Onion, there was just huge empty sections, and like they were like, what's going on? And like, okay, well, those are preferred seats for the visa people. Maybe they're just getting here very last minute, and those ones did fill up, but there was a whole empty row for an alleged sold out showing of the premiere of Glass Onion. The premiere.
Yeah.
And the seat
My
next to me
God.
was empty. I had like one of those weird just 2-seaters, then the wall
Mm-hmm.
empty next to me. And it definitely wasn't an empty seat next to me when I bought the ticket.
Yeah.
So
Confusing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a movie that had a lot of empty seats in the film, at least, not in the screenings. It was Empire of Light, the new film from Sam Mendes, set in and around an old cinema on the south coast of England in the 1980s. Olivia Colman leads the cast, along with Michael Ward, Toby Jones, Colin Firth. And it's an interesting film that kind of has like a lot of things happening in it. There's touches on aspects of mental illness, touches on aspects of racism, touches on just the evolving scene of the town in that time. Very nostalgic to see a sign that says movie tickets only £1.50. Definitely had me sort of like lost for what era we were supposed to be in. And I sort of feel my takeaway is a little bit weird in this one, in that I think there's so many individual elements that I either liked or appreciated, whether that is Olivia Colman being a really amazing actress, whether that is Roger Deakins shooting the heck out of this old cinema. But then there's also all these aspects that just don't work and don't really cohere into one idea. It felt very episodic, and ultimately I was left with just a weird feeling of like, what was the whole point here? I don't know. Did anybody like this one a little bit more, or am I on the right page with my reaction?
You're on the right page.
You're on the right page.
Yeah.
Like, even when you started talking about all the different things it's trying to hit, that's too many things.
Yeah.
Too many. I also found it like quite uninspired for what it clearly thinks it is. In a way, it has a lot of the problems that I feel is kind of similar to The Sun. Not that I would compare them. The Sun is a much worse movie, but this thinks it's something really like, it's like, this is like, we did it. And it's like, no, you guys are saying you want to do a thing that I don't feel like you've done on screen. You're this love of cinema, this appreciation of that doesn't feel like it has anything to do with the movie that's being told. And kind of like I said, I don't know if I said this when we were recording earlier, maybe probably, but it like, this movie could have taken place in a hotel. This could have been a series of hotel employees, and it would have had the same premise. It could have been mall employees. It could have been anything. And I feel like that intrinsically takes away from the purpose if it's called Empire of Light and it's supposed to be this Empire of the Light coming through the projection, like that whole thing, like, and that's if I can't get that magic feel except for like one scene where you just orchestrated it to feel that way.
Right.
And I don't actually think that ties in great to the rest of the movie by the end of it. Like I don't know what you think you did, but and I hated the score. I hated the score. I'll say it. Thought it was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that moment that you're talking about, there's a moment where it kind of feels like it should all sort of come together, and there's like this moment of catharsis, and it probably would have felt really good in a better movie.
Yes,
but it's very pretty shot. There's a lot of pretty shots. I like the shot on the rooftop with the fireworks. That's a very pretty shot. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be Sam Mendes' Oscar movie though.
No.
So
No.
Don't spend money at Chicago.
Probably not.
Probably not. It's also going to be out not too long from now.
The only person who really did anything to show that they like movies as much as this film thinks it does is Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. But even that, I feel like this was like not his strongest either. Like,
yeah,
there's moments.
Look, Deakins is going to give you beautiful looking stuff, but he does it a lot. So it's not necessarily standout Deakins.
Yeah. I wouldn't say, watch something else that he's done before this.
Yeah, of course.
But at least that's a redeeming quality if you do happen to watch this like we all did.
Yeah. Let's talk about Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, the latest from Ryan Johnson, a twisty, turny caper of sorts. Karsten, you did not have to leave this one early this time. What was your reaction to Glass Onion?
I really liked it. It's hard. I don't know how much we're going to talk about this because it is hard to get into it without spoiling it. Like I don't know how much I want to say. It does some things that literally right off the bat, like first shot, I'm like, oh, we're doing this. That it kind of gets away with, in my opinion. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like, I think I cringe at these choices a lot in movies these days, but Ryan Johnson manages to make it pretty funny.
It's a movie that feels very contemporary without feeling like it's trying to remind you that it's contemporary.
Right. And I've seen a lot of complaints about that or not a lot, but like one guy in particular really didn't like it. And I'm like, the first Knives Out was all about this. It was like a very contemporary movie. Like the one kid was like on Twitter the whole time, and like it dealt with a lot of just like stuff we see now, and I just think that's like part of the appeal for Knives Out, to me at least, is like really capturing the annoying moment we're in right now and like the people around. Like I don't know, it just really gets it. And I don't know, I don't think it's as good as the first one as a film, but I think the whodunit mystery is a lot more ambitious and satisfying than the first one. I just don't think, if that makes sense. Like I think,
it feels like he took the first film and tried to double down on the whole twistiness, turniness. Like, I'm going to show you one thing and it's going to turn out to be another thing kind of elements of it. And in some respects, it works really well, and Ryan Johnson is just so good at like the art of deception in a film. But in another, on the other hand, like I did find it to be a little more random than the first one, and that randomness maybe left me a little colder. I still thought this was excellent. Jeff, I know you liked it a lot. Did you like it more than the first?
I wouldn't say more. I would say about the same. The only thing holding it back for me was exactly what you just mentioned, where some of the choices did feel kind of random and you know, to the point where it's like you couldn't have seen it coming because you didn't even think it was a possibility.
Right.
It's like they're just adding elements to make what happened before make sense.
That's fair.
Honestly, I thought it got maybe this is the opposite. Like, I thought it did too much of the whole like set up this small object and this is gonna come back later. And I think the last
not
5
everything
minutes,
needs to be a twist,
right?
Yeah,
or not everything needs to be explained out from the
exactly.
twist. Yeah.
I honestly felt kind of dumb the last 5 minutes of the movie. I'm like, oh my God, I should have seen that coming. But it was like a big example of like so many times when the film is like, it introduces something and then like, and that's like cool. But I think that might be the one, it gets like a little repetitive after a while.
Right. Yeah.
There did feel
still fun. Yeah.
There did feel like there was a lot of Rian Johnson just flexing in this movie. Like particularly the way the camera moved. Like there's this one interaction between Daniel Craig's character and Janelle Monáe's character where they're just seated up opposite each other. And the camera like zooms in and pulls out and moves up and then moves around them. And it's like so unnecessary for a two-person interaction. But like they're having fun and it's a fun movie. And I'm not going to begrudge them from like going a little bravura on what would otherwise be a very boring two-shot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think it might be wearing maybe even more of its mystery on its sleeve compared to the first one. I know that like Rian Johnson specifically says he's not trying to make these movies in a way that you're sitting there constantly racking your brains trying to figure out what's going to happen next. It wants to like reward you for some little things. But I do feel like the twists didn't come off quite to the same height as some of the ones in the first one. But it is fun to notice like a character do something and then being like, oh shit, character just did something. And then something happens to a character and you're like, I noticed that. But then they say something else. But then in your brain, you're like, no, that's not what I witnessed happen.
Yeah.
And then that becomes part of the lore of like, oh, well, like, you know, if somebody, you know, it's like the diversion and just different aspects of it, like weaving more into the mystery and like actual like ways how people like witnesses can like misremember things. So I thought it was really fun. I think if you like the first one, there's not really many reasons why you wouldn't also like this one.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a joke about sweatpants, which is just probably like the best joke of
the best joke of the
best joke of the festival because it starts funny and then they add another layer to it, which just knocks you out and you're like, oh my God.
Yep.
So funny.
So good.
Very funny.
Would
joke.
you recommend paying $30 for this?
Yeah, I paid $50.
Definitely.
It's also that like, given that
I'll-
it's going to Netflix, it's going to be a rare chance to see it in a theater with a crowd.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a music
Aren't
box
they doing a
premiere too,
limited
so-
run? Aren't they doing it?
They are, but you know, with Netflix's like
limited.
restrictions, it's not going to be in AMC's and not going to be in Regal.
Shitty. That's so unfortunate considering how big it was in theaters. Like
And
it's
beautiful.
Beautiful.
The production design is unreal on this movie.
Yeah.
And, hopefully you can notice it on your screen. Probably don't watch it on a laptop if you have a choice.
Yeah.
Art,
I'm
Art has
glad-
a great setup, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But I'm glad Netflix gave him the bag. But at some point, it's kind of like I would have preferred you get less of a bag and have to go in theaters. Like
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to say that Daniel Craig, like I saw the morning after the premiere.
Okay.
And he was so hungover he could not answer anything during the Q&A.
I believe that. I feel like he was drunk going to the truck after the premiere was because I got caught up in the people trying to see the cast when I was leaving. And he was just like, like jumping through trying to get in.
He literally said that though. He's like, I'm too hungover. And then Edward Norton had to like take over every time anyone asked him a question.
Good for Edward Norton.
Wow.
That's why you go to a festival. Movie magic.
To see Daniel Craig drunk.
So good.
I'll talk about Holy Spider pretty briefly. This is a very
that
interesting film out of Iran. Earlier, I was talking about how it's cool to see a film with so many people who are like of the origins of the film. And they asked who was Iranian or of Iranian descent, and maybe 80% of the crowd raised their hands.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty cool to see it amongst that type of audience. This is a very fascinating film about a journalist looking into the serial killer who is committing these murders that he views to be as ordained by God, and he sort of sees himself as kind of like a messiah killer. And it gets at this very interesting intersection of laws and religious laws and where people are allowed to operate in these types of societies. I don't know. I thought this was a very fascinating film, particularly given all the gender roles that are at the forefront of this film of what women are and are not allowed to do and what is deemed like morally objectionable. Given that much more resonance, given recent events coming out of Iran too. But yeah, I thought this was a very stunning movie, a very memorable one. I don't know if I even have like a whole lot to say in terms of how it was assembled, other than like I thought it was fascinating and it kind of kept me at the edge of my seat. Amanda, what was your reaction to Holy Spider?
Yeah, I thought it was. I think the big complaint about it is how kind of like visually graphic it gets at times, and I can definitely agree.
It's
with
unsparing.
It's unsparing, and I think it is actually unnecessarily so in certain regards. I think you can tell this kind of story and the brutality of someone, and I get that they set it up so that they could have that parallel later. But at some point, I don't necessarily know if it's like necessary if you're kind of technically putting something on screen that could be seen as like torture porn to some people. Like they'd be like into it in a weird way, in a gross way.
Yeah,
and that's like
too, no?
Yeah, real victims, because it was a real case.
Well, so he said it's inspired by the real case,
inspired.
although he kind of went to lengths to saying it is just inspired. It's not supposed to be the true story.
Yeah, because there's some definite differences,
Departures,
especially very big departures. Like the main character is kind of like this insert character that was kind of created just for us as the audience to kind of like walk through the story with this journalist character. I did really enjoy it though. Like I did find it like a very effective film. But again, I can see like the complaints for it, but it's worth checking out if you think you can stomach some of that. I know some people just that alone was enough for them to just be like, I'm done with this. So yeah.
Still recommend Borders. The director did that. So really
Borders. Yeah.
Let's talk about Moonage Daydream, which I believe Jeff was the only one of us to see it so far. Although maybe I'll go see it tonight if I can still find an IMAX showing.
If you can, do it.
Oh wait, Art, you saw it too? You got your Bowie posters?
I got my Bowie posters. You can still go get. Just snatch them. They should be in the bag somewhere. But
it was my first Tiff film because the screening was it was the 8th at like 10 a.m. It is the thing is, if you like Bowie, you're gonna like the film. It
seems like it.
I think it puts you into the mind of the artist more than any other musical biopic I've ever seen.
Huh.
Art, you're pointing?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because it's like if you're the more of a Bowie fan that you are, you're gonna like seeing his psyche of it, because I felt the same way. It's not really running you through like point A to point B how he made it. It's more so like what was he feeling during these times. It isn't him making it big and how he toured. It's where was his state of mind when he was touring. Did he feel like he was selling it out? Was he justifying it? How was he losing his creativity? And honestly, like, it's the best credits I've ever seen, because the entire movie he's telling you these are all the things that inspired me. So the credits is literally just his biggest recommendations. It's a list of his best songs. It's they do this thing where they show you the tours, and it'll be like the 81 tour. Here's everybody. The 82 tour. And I don't know. It was a really good doc.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited to see it. I mean, Bowie is such a cinematic musician. His career, just all that he's put forward, that seems like it's a good match for this kind of treatment. Let's talk about My Policeman, the pop culture curiosity of sorts, starring Harry Styles as a closeted policeman.
Definitely no skewed reviews there. I'm definitely not seeing anything fishy about the Letterboxd.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, definitely not 96 Harry Styles fans in there. Oh, definitely not.
This is a story about a policeman, and in the 1950s, I believe it is, and his relationship with a woman and another man at the time, and the ways in which it leads to some illicit situations. Amanda, what did you think about Harry Styles' venture into dramatic acting?
He's not great at it. It seems like he's a little bit better in this than he seems to be in Don't Worry, Darling. But there are moments where it's just like he can't bring that like emotional intensity to like in an intimate role, like where you're supposed to be kind of like really upset at like somebody like that you're supposed to be in a relationship with, or any kind of intimacy there. Like he was more believable in like the very like intimate like sex scenes with like another man than he was, which is like totally fine. I'm not saying there's a problem with that. I'm just saying that he did that level of intimacy more than he did like the emotional intimacy. It didn't really come off as great. He does the kind of shy, questioning, not sure if what's about to happen is right version of this character better than the like, I'm going to be angry. Ooh, I'm going to be angry for a second and I'm going to have a snap moment. I'm going to snap. So, you know, he was fine. He was fine.
So
He
excited
sounds
for you to see
very
him, don't-
whiny in
Yeah.
this film. I kind of felt like
Yeah, very
there's a lot
whiny.
of this very sort of like a one note kind of complainy tone that he
He
hits.
is one note, dude.
You hate him as a character too. And they don't,
Yeah.
the movie doesn't make it seem like you're supposed to hate him as a character. You just walk away being like, man, Tom's a dick. Like, why the fuck is everybody bending over backwards for fucking Tom here? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. It sort of feels a bit misguided in just the construction of it too. It has this flashback structure where it introduces you to the characters as older people in the 1990s.
The Notebook.
And yeah, like The Notebook. But like even that glimpse of it, it kind of tells you where they all end up in their journey in a way that completely robs the rest of the film of tension. Like you know exactly where it's going. It's following the book for these kinds of films. If you've seen A Single Man, if you've seen Brokeback Mountain, you're not really getting anything that's kind of differentiated here. Ultimately, what would set this apart is if the performances are really good, or if it's going to go a little bit deeper and be a little bit more challenging. And it's not. It's very surface level. So I don't know. I thought this was definitely one of the weaker films I saw from this year's TIFF.
Yeah, it was fine. Anybody else see it or?
It'll
think it
be
was just
on
us
Prime
two.
November.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not too far from now.
now.
All right, let's talk about One Fine Morning. This is the new one from Mia Hansen-Love. I didn't get around to this one, but I think Karsten did.
And I did as well.
I saw it.
So what'd you all think?
This is my first from her, so I don't know how qualified I am with her filmography here, but I mean, I really liked it. It's one that's really grown on me. I think the idea of someone kind of grieving over a parent that's not, I don't want to say grieving because he doesn't die in the film. Spoiler alert, Jesus Christ.
Grieving over what your parent was, like who your parent was.
Exactly. Like dealing with that while going through this like new kind of not the best relationship. Just like a lot going on at the same time. And dealing with loss in different forms. I don't know. I thought it was really well done. Not a ton to say about it, but I really liked it. Yeah.
Amanda?
Yeah, it's pretty similar thoughts there. I don't actually like how it ended with one certain character. There's kind of like an aspect where I'm all like, no, girl, be a queen. Don't stand for this, but it's fine.
Yeah. It's
Jeff,
very
your
French.
reaction too?
I liked it a lot. You know, it's very French. A lot of
yeah, very French.
Yeah. You know, I thought it was really interesting the way it dealt with infidelity. It's very well acted. Lea Seydoux is always excellent.
Right.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
I would say this might be her best, actually. I
Ooh.
feel like this really kind of
yeah.
gave her a chance to really show what she can, because I kind of felt a little bit underwhelmed by her in Crimes of the Future. So I actually felt that this really gave her room to kind of breathe in like her own language for one, and then just a really strong performance.
Yeah, Crimes of the Future, I think, is just such a weird film that I don't think that counts.
It doesn't. Still.
Annette, though, I mean, right?
Ooh, yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is just the first normal film she's been in a while, where it's like you can act as a normal person.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, I also saw Bergman Island, so and it's very similar. A lot. I see the
through line.
Yeah, the through line here. Infidelity with nice scenery.
Cool. curious about that one. Let's talk about Sanctuary, the film from Zachary Wiggin about two people confined to a hotel room, the heir to a hotel empire and the dominatrix that he's hired, battling in matching of wits and power in the sexual relationship they have. The movie that this brought to mind immediately for me was The Duke of Burgundy. I think another film that's a really cool two-hander where the power sort of gets exchanged several times in the film. Amanda, I know you really love this one. Tell me a little about. Sorry, tell me a little about Sanctuary.
I thought this was so good. I think it might actually be my favorite of the festival. Keep in mind that there was some I'd already seen, but I had a blast with this. This was so much fun. I'm already a big fan of Margaret Qualley and Christopher Abbott. Christopher Abbott never lets me down in these indie like film festival roles. He's always great. Those movies always end up being some kind of highlight of my festivals, but I just really like how this starts kind of the way you expect it to, this kind of like weird exchange between two people where, she comes to the hotel room, they act out these scenarios, and then how it kind of goes, it keeps going when he's kind of like, sadly, this needs to end. And she's like, but does it though? And this battle of wits back and forth and like the mental trip and at points where he's all like, you need to stop. You're messing with me. Like, I'm so exhausted now. You just need to stop just for a minute, like, please. But then she just keeps going and going. And I thought it was just so fun and just such a strong performance out of both of them. Mm-hmm. And for like what the premise is, it has moments where you would say, yes, this is erotic. This is this, but it doesn't show anything. Like, you're not seeing anything. It's not graphic. Like, no one, like, you're not even seeing. I've seen more graphic movies that have like PG-13 ratings with how they've chosen to like display their sex scenes or something. So for like the premise of this movie, it still ends up being like shockingly safe for watching with parents, I guess. Maybe not, but I don't know. Maybe not.
That's going to be on the poster.
There. Yeah, not parents, but like
watch with mom.
You could be watching it with like headphones, and your parents could walk by every now and again, and they probably wouldn't necessarily think anything unusual was happening. So like, I thought this was so much fun, and I am so excited to see it again. Yeah, super, big blast for me.
Awesome. Yeah, Karsten, did you also have fun with Sanctuary?
I had so much fun. This movie's hilarious. I mean, just the ending is such a perfect cherry on top of this whole movie. You're like, there's no fucking way. And then they go there. Sorry.
It's so good.
I love it. Yeah, it's kind of the thing where you don't expect to be as like kind of swept up in it as you end up being, especially because the two characters are in a lot of ways kind of unlikable.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you at one point it gets so ridiculous. Like, what would I do in this situation? Like, what would I do if I were either of them? And that's what's so fascinating is like the film takes it into the most unpredictable route while like you're left with so little to go with. I thought it was fascinating. I guess I really liked it. I don't know why I was like kind of lukewarm when I left. I guess it's because it's just so simple that I'm like, wish it was even more than it was. But like for what it's given, it does so much with it. And very, very Roman Roy type of movie, I would say. Enjoyed this one a lot.
Yeah, I think there's something about it that the dynamic is so electric and the dialogue moves so quickly, and Margot particularly is so able to just change the feeling of a scene on a dime. Like, her expressions are unbelievable in this movie, and the way in which they'll just sort of go from one moment into like a whole other idea. I was getting pulled along at a pace that when we finally did get to the ending, and this is a relatively short movie, I think it's like 90 minutes, maybe just under it. By the time we got to the ending, I was like, oh wait, that's it? Like I could hang out a little more. We could go a little bit deeper. And I'm not saying that to like take anything away from the movie, which I thought was excellent. Just that like it is such a good time that like I don't know if I was ready for it to end when it ended.
Yeah. I really want to see like the next like whatever
Yes.
happens
Yeah.
after that.
Yes.
'Cause it just-
Yes.
I just know it like you pick up right there and it gets even better. Like
I need
Yeah.
that. I need the
ugh.
family reactions, you know? Like,
Yes.
No, but it's great. You know, it's dramatic, it's thrilling, it's sexy, it's erotic, it's I don't know, it's hilarious. Like it's just a really fun combo of things and unexpected too. So
Yeah.
definitely put that one on your radar if it's not already. Let's talk about my favorite out of TIFF. And that is the Banshees of Inisherin, the latest from writer-director Martin McDonagh, returning to Ireland after his sojourn in the U.S. This one has Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson starring as a pair of friends who find themselves at an impasse when one abruptly decides he doesn't like the other anymore. And I think the thing that I really love about this film is how it starts with this very small idea. Two friends and one of them decides he doesn't want to hang out anymore, and it takes that and really like expands it into this existential philosophical idea of like what is a good use of time, how should we act to people on Earth. And I think you can take this movie from its small details or take it on like a grander scale like that, and it works either way. It is so hilarious and bleak in terms of its humor, but just like I think McDonagh is one of the most skilled at just lacing in perfect bits of profanity into his dialogue in ways that are so funny. The repeated lines are so funny. I was just really captivated by this one. I thought it was so funny and it stuck with me afterwards. I loved Banshees of Inisherin, so I'm curious if anybody else felt as strongly as I did, because to me this was the best film at the festival.
This is like my second favorite, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sanctuary just like fucking did it for me. Like that was just, but this is so good. And like you said, it is really just that idea that you could take it just on the face value of, you know, like this friendship gone awry in a real way. And then you can look at it at that bigger level of like, you know, what ought you be in the world? What is a good, valuable trait? What are things that kind of goes in weird, like ways that's going to remind you of like Whiplash and like the idea of like, is it better to be remembered or is it better to be liked, and just different things like that. And an interesting look at both sides of the arguments there. I thought it was really great performances. I also really like that. I feel like there's almost a mental shift with how you start perceiving Colin's character. You kind of start off thinking he's kind of, you know, this regular not well-to-do, but just, you know, regular kind of character, and then you kind of see how different people in the village kind of perceive him and how that changes his own perception of himself.
Is he nice
and how
or is he dull?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was like, this is really good.
Yeah. I was really looking at it because I think it's a film that can only come in this man's filmography after something like 3 Billboards. I think there's a lot of that in this, not necessarily the movie, but like how it was received. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm like reading into it too much. I just like the whole like, but you liked me yesterday line is like, it seems like a very, I was just kind of looking at it from that lens. And I'm like, this feels like Martin McDonagh kind of like processing the fact that a lot of people that loved him gave up on him after that film. And like, I don't know, obviously it's like, it's at its bones is like just two friends. And I really love films like that. It reminded me of like Mikey and Nikki by Elaine May in a lot of ways. And I just, it's hilarious. Like you said, very bleak. I don't think it's as like easy to recommend as I expected it to be. Just because it is extremely bleak, but that's so funny to me. Like I love the sense of humor this has, especially because of the one kind of crazy thing that happens or starts happening like halfway through, and you're like, there's no fucking way. And then just the more it happens, the funnier it is. It's just so, I don't know. It's amazing how, I guess just like thrilling it is for how simple the story is. And I can't wait to see this one again. It's the first of his that I've actually loved. Like, I haven't really been hooked on any of his movies yet, and this one I was like, yes,
Really?
absolutely,
Okay.
does everything right.
Yeah, I went into this one hoping I would like it as much as some of his other ones, and I ended up liking it more than any film he's ever made. So yeah, I mean, just excited to watch it again at this point. It's such a good time.
Yeah.
Another very good time from a renowned filmmaker. Let's talk about the Fabelmans, Steven Spielberg, doing some home movies, telling his life story, printing the legend of Steven Spielberg, telling the story of Sammy Fabelman, quotation marks, who grew up post-World War II in Arizona, and how he learned a love for filmmaking while also realizing things about his family. This is a really cool portrait, not just of being a young artist and having a dream, but also just sort of looking back at your own life and how the things you go through sort of build the character that you become. It's a Steven Spielberg movie, so this thing is directed to like the nth degree. Just some of the shots in this thing are unbelievable. There's a moment maybe like 5 minutes in where the young Sammy gets gifted a train set, and they do a shot like from the perspective of the train set zooming towards his face, and it's like,
So
I knew from that moment, all right, my boy Janusz has got me. This is going to be a feast for the eyes. And it's just a great story too. I was surprised because Spielberg is not someone who's necessarily known for his scripts or for like the dialogue, but there are many extremely quotable and memorable lines in this thing too. I think I've seen some people respond to the episodic nature of it and say that they felt like it doesn't really work as like one thing. But I think for me, it's a memory play, right? It's him going through the things that he felt were like integral to his journey, and saying and sort of like trying to give you that experience from his perspective. I kind of loved this one, to be honest. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be like one of the best things I see this year, but I just really loved it. And I don't know, it really does get the magic of movies in a way that maybe The Empire of Light didn't. Karsten, I think you were maybe a little more skeptical going in, and I think you ended up really positive on this one, right?
Yeah, I had really not really low expectations, but I guess I was just kind of expecting Belfast round 2, which is so embarrassing because it's like comparing Kenneth to Steven. It's like, nah, I don't know why I ever doubted him. This is honestly, it kind of goes back and forth between this and Decision to Leave for my favorite of the festival.
Cool.
I'm embarrassingly like obsessed with this movie. It's so, I don't know why it's so corny to say I love this movie, but I love it.
It's beautiful.
It's like the first movie about movies that like kind of gets it, and not only just movies but like filmmaking. And
Yes.
I love how it's kind of just about this boy like trying, like being thrown all these situations in life where he doesn't have like any control of anything, and like how film is the one space where he's like, I can make this my own thing, and like I can take like the high school thing. I think is such a great example, but also like everything with Michelle Williams' character and his mom is just really sad and hard to watch. But like, God, it's yeah, everything about this worked for me. It's beautifully shot. The ending, which I will not say a word about, is
amazing.
Is probably the best ending of like the last 5 years. It's just like, oh man, everything about it. I loved the episodic thing about like the whole like, it's kind of just a memoir, really.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was really moved, and the worst part about it is the poster. I know some people love the poster. I think it needs a new poster, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's my take.
What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was kind of similar to Karsten in that I wasn't really expecting anything particularly great from it, but then I walked out feeling like I needed to kind of like do a deep dive into Spielberg's history, and then kind of finding out that like there is some retconning here, and that it like, even though a lot of it's based on his own life, he didn't find out an aspect of his parents' divorce until like after he had already started making, like after he'd already made E.T. and stuff like that. And then it actually took like Catch Me If You Can was actually the response to him finding out some things. Like, it was just really interesting to look into different aspects of his history and how it informs how he would portray different characters on screen or different aspects of a story. And now having all of that hindsight to be able to kind of tell the story around like a loosely adapted version of his own life and how that might have affected his filmmaking going forward, and just like the trajectory of his life in general, and just kind of the ideas of like forgiveness and how things can end up like affecting you so much in the long run. So I ended up walking out also really enjoying it. And this is one of the ones that if you want to watch a movie that you feel like the love for cinema, like this is what's going to do it for you. And like it starts right from the beginning, again, with that train set idea, just him always feeling the need to recreate something with that train set to almost deal with the situation that he saw, to have control over something. And then I think it was Karsten that was saying that the whole thing is just kind of this exercise in like control. Maybe it was you, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
but just
Karsten.
this, okay. But yeah, just this whole thing basically being an exercise in control. And this fight to try to make cinema feel real and to make the things that you're looking at on screen feel real and look real and come across in that way, and not being satisfied until you can actually do it. So I thought it was really magical in a lot of ways.
The whole stuff with the guns in his movie, I don't want to
That's
spoil
exactly
it.
it. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Just
Crazy.
Those are the moments that I want in a movie.
Yeah, like stuff that no one would ever be able to relate to right
Right.
now, because we've moved so far along in how film is made at the home level. So great.
It was funny in the Q&As after, he was saying how the movies they make were like the movies he made, but he made sure they were more polished this time.
Yeah.
But it's a little that wish fulfillment, recreating your story, like
Of course.
printing the legend rather than the real story. It's, you know, the autobiography, not the biography version of Spielberg's life. Let's talk a little bit about The Good Nurse. This one is coming to Netflix at the end of October. It's from director Tobias Lindholm and stars both Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. Chastain and Redmayne play a pair of nurses. Chastain is suspicious about the increased number of codes and mysterious patient deaths at her hospital, and she fights to uncover the truth. I thought this was a pretty competent, solid thriller, medical thriller of sorts, that just keeps you on the edge of guessing, like, how are they going to be able to nail this down, because it sort of comments on the ways in which institutions often cover up the wrongdoings that go on within them in order to preserve their own legacies, and seeing this struggle against this greater force and to the attempts to try and like seek out justice. I just thought it was very effectively done. It's not necessarily like, you know, the most original or pulse pounding thriller out there, but I think it's a good time. And personally, I feel like something that happens at these festivals is people will go into them sort of anticipating, all right, is this going to be a best picture contender? Is this going to be a best actress contender? Is this like an Oscars movie? And no, The Good Nurse is not really like an Oscar contender, but I don't think that means it's not a good movie. Amanda, I think you maybe were not quite as high on it as me, but I think you liked it, right?
I was like fine with it. I just feel like it was, I feel like it kind of was constantly shooting itself in the foot in terms of some aspects of the tension, and I would have liked more of the focus to be on that like procedural side. Like I wanted it to feel more like something like Spotlight, where it's like these people being like, how is this happening? And you get that a little bit, but then so much of it is focused on Chastain's character, and she is great as that character. And I think that there's aspects of her story that are interesting put into this, but I think that ultimately it somehow just pulled away from the experience for me with like the focus on her personal story. So I just kind of felt a little bit weird on it. So I didn't love it. I also felt like it started kind of overstaying its welcome at a certain point. It had some really great moments, but yeah, otherwise I think it's at home and Netflix.
It also, I think it takes this year's crown for the imitation "Today we call them computers" grown worthy what's it title at the end or epilogue bit, but I guess I'll save that for when more people get to see it.
Yeah. My favorite thing about Netflix films at the festival where they play the Netflix logo on before the film, I'm like, this is weird.
This is way too big.
I'm like, my TV's never this big.
Yeah. Bruiser was a Hulu original, which I was surprised by. I didn't even know Hulu movies played Tiff, but
I'm pretty excited for Bruiser. Yeah.
Bruiser's really good. Let's talk about The Lost King briefly. This is the new film that's a collaboration between director Stephen Frears and writers Steve Coogan and Jeff Pope. They previously collaborated on the Oscar-nominated film Philomena, which is like one of my mom's favorite movies of the last couple of years. But I feel like it's firmly in that like adult demographic of like competent dramas that aren't necessarily showy or subversive enough to weird out an older crowd. This is definitely in that mold. It's about an amateur historian who tries to defy the academic establishment in her efforts to correct the legacy of King Richard III, king who died 500 years ago. Very funny movie to see on the same weekend as the Queen's death and her funeral, in that this is a movie where a woman fights hard to preserve the legacy of a monarch and fight for his reputation while people are in the real world actively discussing the legacy of a monarch and maybe maybe some unsavory aspects of her legacy that aren't as well known or discussed. But setting all that aside, I mean, this is like a pretty competent historical drama. I think you get really solid performances from Sally Hawkins and Steve Coogan. It's just kind of one of those movies that doesn't really like raise your heart rate at all. It's fine. It exists. It's not bad. And there's some funny moments in there. Steve Coogan in particular has some really great, very dry line deliveries here, but not exactly something that I think anybody needs to like rush out of the theaters to try and catch.
Sounds like Causeway.
In some ways, yeah. Although maybe like a slightly more fun time than Causeway. At least this one has Steve Coogan.
Yeah. The Coog.
All right, so the Coog. All right, so we got 3 movies left in our TIFF breakdown, and this one is a little bit more fun. Let's talk briefly about The Menu, directed by Mark Mylod of Succession fame. This is about a couple who travels to a coastal island to eat at an exclusive restaurant where the chef has prepared a lavish menu with some shocking surprises. It's a food-centric restaurant culture thriller that has some pretty dark twists that it's hiding. Amanda, what was your reaction to The Menu?
I had a lot of fun with this one. I think my expectations might have been a little bit too high going into it because everybody was like really talking it up as if it was like even better than you thought it was going to be. And a lot of it is better than you think it's going to be. And a lot of it's going to go in directions where you're not expecting it's going to go. Anya Taylor-Joy, fantastic as always. Ray Fiennes is a great little weirdo in this. So fun. I feel like there was maybe a little bit more I wanted in certain areas, maybe a little bit more, especially with Nicholas Holt's character and kind of stuff there. But at the same time, I can appreciate why you wouldn't need to spend a bunch of time delving into some of that. But yeah, I feel like there's layers here that they are playing very obvious on those sleeve and they're directly mentioning them. But then I feel like there's probably some like deeper things you can look into there on the repeat viewings, what like certain characters signify and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a movie that will reveal more of itself to me when I get a chance to rewatch it. On the initial watch, I did feel like it went from tame to wild a little bit quickly,
and then
it kind of stays in that one place for a little while. Like I think with films like this, given that there's some surprises and some twists, you expect there to like keep being twists, like in Glass Onion. You know, they keep changing the circumstances, and in this, like they kind of find a groove that's pretty fun and pretty like, you know, acid tongued. and they stick there for a little bit. And I don't know, maybe that's why I feel like I wanted a little bit more, but at the same time, I had a really fun time with it, and I think like all of it worked. I just, maybe it's more of an appetizer than a main course, but either way, it's like really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
And Ralph Fiennes, I thought was just incredible.
Oh, he was so good, especially when you get down to the ending with him a little bit too. Like
he does this thing where he's such like a stern, commanding presence in the film, but there are these things that happen that kind of delight his character, and he'll just do this little like quarter smile with the corner of his mouth. Yeah, like a twitch of a smile. Mm-hmm. And you need an actor like Ralph Fiennes to really sell stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay, let's talk about what I think was maybe the hottest ticket of TIFF, and that is The Whale. They only had a couple screenings of this movie, so it was hard to get in. Jeff didn't even bother. I was out of town. But I think Amanda and Karsten had a chance to see this one. Karsten, people are hyping it up as the big best actor contender of the year. It's the Fraser Sance, Brendan Fraser's comeback. Is this as good as advertised of a performance from Brendan Fraser, and does the movie justify that performance?
Well, firstly, shout out to Amanda. The reason I got to see this movie. Half Amanda, half Adam from YMS. But yes, it's, as I tweeted like a week ago, it's like better than you think it's going to be. I think I think it goes past just being like a comeback performance for me. It's like just hands down an amazing performance, like the kind that just you can like know so much about this man just off the first like 2 minutes you spend with him. Mm-hmm. Which honestly, I don't know if that helps or does the opposite for the film. I don't know. I was a little underwhelmed by the film itself. I'm not gonna lie, and I think it's like the best thing about it is Brendan Fraser. Obviously, I think Sadie Sink is great. I think Hong Chow deserves the kind of talk that
our
both
girl
of them are
Hong
getting
Chow,
because she was phenomenal. She was like blew me away.
Also phenomenal in The Menu, but continue.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even know she was in. Wow. Big year. But yeah, I thought the film itself was like kind of surface level for how much it felt like it was doing. I think everything that the film is saying in the script, you can already kind of pick up on with Brendan Fraser's performance. And I think it's kind of like all about like learning who this guy is, and it's kind of building to the ending, which is like extremely disturbing and like definitely like one of the best parts about the film. But like a majority of this film isn't really saying anything about what he's going through that hasn't been said better elsewhere. I don't think it really gets into this eating disorder in the ways that it should. It just felt very surface level and kind of like, look at how horrifying and dark this is, and not really explaining like I don't know how it got to be this way, or in a way that's past just like explaining like the death and like all of that. I don't know. It felt very on the surface to me. But I might be in the minority here. What did you guys think?
Yeah, Amanda, what was your reaction?
It's just Amanda,
Yeah, I think I liked it more than Karsten. I can definitely get the idea that it is very service level in certain ways. I do. This one also has like the discourse going around it that a lot of people are just like very upset that it even exists in the story that it's telling without them really even knowing what story it is telling. And it's based on a play, and it was written, the man who wrote it, it's based on his own personal experience of going through something and becoming like a binge eater as a result of it. And it's kind of him telling the story of reconciling with that. And I can definitely understand why it's not something that certain people are going to want to see in a movie, and that they're not going to want to see on screen, or they just don't think that it should exist. And I do think that there are times where Aronofsky does some of his, audio things and little visual things where it makes things a little bit more uncomfortable than they necessarily need to be, a little bit grosser than they probably need to be seen as on screen, especially where they don't always, as Karsten was saying, go deeper into it in certain ways. But I do think there is a lot of empathy there that people are going to be surprised about or just not necessarily expecting. There is a lot of empathy there that people are reacting to him in like very horrible ways, but ways that feel like, I think the play came out in like the early 2010s, and that definitely the sentiments I feel like were a little bit more widespread then. The way that somebody's going to react to people in 2012 is very different than how we now know. It's like, okay, well, now we have a better understanding of certain like eating disorders and binge eating things, but I feel like people are going to want to put this on like the same level of what like TLC does with certain shows and people and their real lives. Whereas this is just really like a man who has made a lot of mistakes in his life, who's gone through a horrible tragedy, but is now trying to kind of like reconcile the biggest mistake he's ever made before it's too late. And it's very interesting to see how that progresses out. And I really love how something at like the beginning of the movie like directly connects out to the end when you realize like how it all played together. And I thought that was really beautiful. It is like shockingly beautiful in certain ways. But I'm interested to see what like the general audiences end up thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. Fraser's performance was really good. But I can understand why some people might just think that this is maybe the type of story that doesn't need to be told, but it needed to be told in a different way. But I do think that it is a lot more empathetic than people are probably going to assume based on what they're seeing from posters and stuff.
Yeah, I'm jealous of you both, not just because you got to see it, but because you got to see it, I think, before the discourse train just spins out of control, and it's almost like impossible to watch this movie without like Twitter's voice in the back of your head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely curious on it for multiple reasons. You know, I'm curious to see how they'll actually handle this story, but also just curious to see a great Brendan Fraser performance, because people who have loved it and people who have hated it all seem to be in agreement about him as an actor in it. So that at least is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up with one that I think everybody who got to see it enjoyed, and that is Women Talking, the latest from writer-director Sarah Polley, about a group of women in an isolated religious colony struggling to reconcile their faith with a string of sexual assaults committed by the colony's men. Very interesting film that sees these amazing actresses essentially sitting down and settling their differences of opinion and how they can move forward, how they're supposed to continue to exist in safe accommodations given their situation. And I think it's a very surprising movie in several respects. Part of the surprise is just like figuring out where and when things are. I think there's just these nuances to the depiction of it that I wasn't expecting coming in. And ultimately, like, I think the thing that I really resonated with was how much this film gives time to letting you understand all of its characters and all the different perspectives of its different characters, that there aren't just like two sides to a story, that everybody has their own intricacies to how they view a situation. Jeff, this was actually the film that we met after.
All right, yeah.
What was your takeaway from Women Talking?
Yeah, Karsten and I definitely had a better seat than you at the theater.
That's very close. I was watching the movie like that for the most part.
Oof.
But this film is so much more than, you know, most films, just about the art of acting. Because it's almost set up like a stage play in that it's, you know, primarily in like one location, and it's just people having just interactions within a group in one space.
Yeah.
And it all is reliant on the acting, and it's just acted so well.
It's a very like monologue-y movie. I feel like a lot of people might be able to take sections of this movie for their like acting classes and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also like you have Claire Foy, you have Jessie Buckley, you have Rooney Mara, you have Judith Ivey, who I thought was excellent in this movie. Just really, really giving you depth to these characters.
Yeah. It's funny like that we just talked about The Whale, because I think this is, compared to that, a very good example of like taking a very wordy kind of stage play. I don't think this was based off a play. It was
A book.
a
It's a
book.
book.
Right. Okay. So like, I don't know, just put that onto the screen in a much more interesting way than The Whale, in my opinion. Like, I think this has some phenomenal editing, like does some cutaways that really worked for me, keeps the room very interesting, the way they shoot the characters. I don't know. It was just like way more fascinating than I expected it to be, for being like mostly conversation, that I just thought really worked like as a film rather than just like, you know, the script. Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about when we were leaving the theater is like the way that they're able to really give the movie a sense of urgency. This takes place mostly over the course of one night, and they kind of have this ticking clock element in terms of having to figure things out before a certain thing happens. And, you know, just like the way in which they're able to kind of give you all these ideas and show you sort of the stakes of the situation without it feeling too manipulative, too fake, too exploitative. It just kind of feels like a very natural lived-in conversation where these women who don't necessarily have the best options available to them are trying to make do and trying to ensure that what they have, what their daughters will have, is better than what they had before. So I don't know. I thought this was fascinating. And like you were saying, the script, I think it's just an excellent script. The writing is just crackerjack stuff. I was riveted the whole way through, even in the moments when the film sort of intentionally slows down. There's something really alive to the whole thing. Amanda, you were a fan of his as well?
Yeah, I was. I was just gonna make a terrible joke of like, wow, an awful lot of men talking here.
We left the woman talking to the end.
Yeah. No, I thought it basically just the same thing that you guys were saying. That I think for me the most interesting part was realizing that this wasn't really like a historical period piece.
Right.
Yeah.
That it's like this specific community and how that could have left them open to more not manipulation but exploitation than in a lot of other situations where technically they're on the cusp of being able to get to something better and to a completely different life, and a life that they can only dream of knowing or understanding, something that would feel so far removed from them and their faith. But versus it being like a historical period piece where you might just be leaving from like one situation that's exactly the same to another situation that's exactly the same. But that's almost like the horrific aspect of this, is that some of these people are genuinely concerned for like what's going to happen to their soul if they don't make amends in certain ways, if they don't offer forgiveness for certain things that have happened when people haven't even offered up apologies for what have happened, and would rather just let it, you know, fester, or would still be trying to get away with it. So I thought it was incredibly powerful in that respect, and just great performances out of everyone, just really captivating for something that again is just people in a room talking. So yeah, big fan, liked it a lot.
Yeah, so for me, if we're transitioning a little bit into like the best movies we saw here, I mean, I think Banshees of Inisherin is probably my top still. I have How to Blow Up a Pipeline at number 2. I have Fabelmans at number 3. And then I think I got Women Talking at number 4. I really did love this one, and I thought it was just like a fascinating, really exciting movie. Jeff, I'll go to you next. What were your favorites from your experience at TIFF?
Yeah. I mean, I think Glass Onion, even though I have some faults with it, it's just such a fun movie.
Yeah.
So that's their Weird. Is again another just really fun experience. Also, Moonage Daydream, great. And then I think I liked One Fine Morning more than Karsten, so that's probably hovering in the top 5.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Karsten?
So number 1 is probably Decision to Leave. Again, it kind of goes back and forth between that
excited
and
for that one.
The Fabelmans at number 2. Such a surprise. I did not think that would be this high. Number 3, I'd probably go Broker. I really loved Broker. It's like I said, best of his, and then probably Women Talking.
Nice.
As the top 4. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Amanda?
Sanctuary is my number 1. I just had such
It's probably
a
my number
blast with
5.
that. Yeah. Then I'm gonna go Decision to Leave, if I'm counting that. I almost don't want to because I saw it at Con, so I will actually leave it on. I'll put number 2 for this festival, specifically at Banshees. I'll do Banshees, and then 3 Glass Onion. Those are my top 3, and then Fabelmans and a couple of other ones are kind of rounding out pretty close together in those other areas, but I think those are like by and far my top 3.
Awesome. Nice. Art, I know you didn't get to see a whole bunch from TIFF. What are the ones that we've made you the most excited for? What are you just eager to see?
My 3 would be I like movies, Bowie,
I like movies.
Bowie, and Woman King, which I liked as well. But no, I'm excited to see Banshees. A lot of these are going to be out in Chicago or New York. It's the ones that don't have dates, like Sanctuary. That's not playing anywhere else. It's like those
not
are
even
the
picked
movies
up.
That nothing. So it's like those are the ones that don't have that are up in the air that I think are always the best ones to catch at a festival because then you get to like campaign for them and at least you got to see it and not wait who knows how long. So yeah,
absolutely. So those are the movies we saw. It's a long list of stuff, but that doesn't even scratch the surface at TIFF because there's still a whole bunch of other ones that we didn't get to see.
Which
I don't know
we'll
if
talk about now in the next hour.
Yeah. We'll start listing Falcon Lake and Bones of Crows. I don't know if any of you have any final thoughts on TIFF or just the experience of it or what you're looking forward to. But I mean, there's still so much out there to catch.
Oh, I also saw no bears. I don't think we actually talked about it.
Yeah, we skipped over that.
That's fine.
Was it good?
Yeah.
It was. I don't think I loved it as much as some people did, but it's very interesting story.
It won the top award at Venice or something, which I think a lot of people were surprised by.
It's a very interesting story and how it's told and the layers there.
My man Jafar, always an interesting filmmaker.
Currently in prison.
Yeah.
As happens to Iranian filmmakers, it turns out. Not a great situation.
No.
Art and I will be catching that one when it makes its way to New York in a couple weeks. So we'll talk about it more soon. And we'll be talking about a lot of these movies because a lot of them are going to be big Oscar contenders. Y'all were mentioning Brendan Fraser in The Whale. I think Women Talking and Fabelmans are solid Best Picture contenders. Maybe Banshees of Inisherin as well.
Hopefully.
So, a lot of really good stuff. But I think we can finally wrap our TIFF coverage for this year. Thank you guys so much for joining us and for talking through all the movies. Amanda, where can people catch more from you?
You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, occasionally Twitch, but not really, all at Amanda the Jedi.
Jeff, how about you?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at my name. I think is both of them.
Just at Jeff.
Yeah, and then also I have a YouTube as well that I don't really, post that many things to. But if you want to see me drink some old Coke with Karsten watching via webcam,
hell yeah!
I mean, if that's what you want.
That's on there.
That's where you find it.
You're not the most prolific poster on YouTube, but when you do, it's something worth.
It makes a splash.
It's fun.
Karsten, where can people find more from you?
I'm Runquist Karsten on Twitter, and I'm actually going to plug everybody check out Dirtbag at Chicago International Film Fest.
Check out Dirtbag.
Speaking of film festival movies.
Yeah, you go to their website. I don't know if you can get tickets for this one yet, unless you remember, but
it's in my top 5 shorts of the fest so far.
There we go. I expect to see you there, Art. That's it
with the director in attendance at Chicago Critics Fest.
Yeah.
No.
Are you doing a Q&A afterwards?
I have no idea, but I'm gonna wear a fun outfit.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all I know.
Like a white suit that you cover in
covered
dirt.
in dirt. Yeah, covered in dirt.
Then they don't let you in.
Yeah.
Awesome. Arturo, where can people find more from you?
You can find me at Elmi Explain on Twitter, on Letterboxd, on YouTube, or every week here at the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut Podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast, and then make sure you're not subscribed just to the audio podcast, to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our bright smiling faces as we run through the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday. And please leave us a comment, like the videos. Consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Helps us get on those TV and film podcast charts everywhere. Like our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter pages. You can also support the Patreon. All of them are available at Intercut Pod, where you can get updates throughout the week from me, from Art, from Amanda, from Karsten, from Jeff, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, we're doing terrorism.
All right.